girl standing in front of him held out her hands and asked if Renya was ready. Bright flashes started to flash, after which she apologized for dragging him into this. Renya walked up to the portal that the girl had opened and turned to her. The goddess said that she would hope that the boy would be very lucky in his next life. Kunugi Renya died peacefully at the age of 94, but when his soul arrived to the goddess, she sent him to a parallel world. The boy stepped into the portal and found himself in the middle of a forest. The boy began to look around, thinking that this was another world. The sky was very clear, and the boy thought that other than that, everything was not so different. This calmed him down, although his appearance in the forest was a little embarrassing. The guy had almost no memories of his past life. He looked at his shirt and then said that he didn't yet know how safe this world was. Renya wasn't sure if the clothes he was wearing were considered normal here. He wondered if he might have other clothes, and then accidentally opened his inventory. The boy began to study the information panel and realized that here, as he guessed, Renya could store various things. He also saw that the boy had received a level 10 Sinai as a weapon. Suddenly, the young man was able to find the help menu, which he immediately opened. It was written there that artifacts are lost craft items not created by a person upon reaching level 10. Also, all artifacts are given a certain classification. Renya understood everything, noting that in this body everything was more comfortable for him. He put on his equipment, continuing to look at the Shinai. The angels forbade the goddess to do this, and since the boy had mastered kendo in his past life, she assumed that he knew how to use a sword, so she gave him a Shinai. Now everything became clear. Renya also thought that it would be nice if he could continue living in this world. At first, the boy decided that he needed to find people and ask for directions. Cursing the goddess, the guy thought that she had thrown him too far into the wilderness, from which getting out would be quite a task. Now he had to choose a direction, right or left. Renya found a small branch which he placed on the road. He thought it was a bit of an old-fashioned way to find his way, but he couldn't think of another one yet. The guy began to take his hand away from the branch, choosing the direction in which the branch would fall. Suddenly, Renya heard a scream somewhere to the left, which could also be considered a sign. Renya looked to the side, wondering if his ears were deceiving him, and if that was really a scream. The young man clenched one of his fists and wanted to curse when he saw what was ahead. Two armed girls, also dressed in armor, stood in the middle of the road. They were surrounded by several men, who gradually closed the circle, laughing. One of the girls who wielded a sword and had long, luxurious dark hair was known Sion Femme-Fatale. Her companion, who was a blonde with a mace, Rona Chevalier. The man who was part of this cordon smiled nastily and turned to the girls. Laughing slightly, he asked them not to act as untouchable as they were showing themselves to be. The girls remained firmly on their feet, their weapons at the ready. Someone else from the crowd began waving his hand, telling the girls that they just wanted to play with them for a little while. The two ladies surrounded were not talkative. Sion sternly told the bandits not to approach them. Suddenly, the whole company heard the voice of a young man who addressed them. Renya began to come closer, asking if the men were ashamed. He called them a bunch of grown men who were picking on two young ladies. The girls continued to watch what was happening in silence. Renyi did not have much of a spirit of a strong warrior and protector, so they did not yet hope for salvation. Renya thought that they didn't understand him. The boy thought that he couldn't ask people anything if they didn't even understand what he was talking about. Renya felt was the leader of the others, turned to him completely and said that she had no idea who Renya was. The bandit asked if the boy had any problems. Renya was a little scared, immediately answering that he had no problems. At that moment, Sion turned to Renya, calling out to him. She said that she didn't know who he was, but the guy had better run away. Sion also added that the boy would not be able to handle them. She immediately explained that they were soldiers from the mercenary kingdom. The girl insisted that Renya forget about them and run away. The mercenary leader approached the young man, cracking his fists. He confirmed everything Sion had shouted earlier, and then said that they were currently very busy with their own affairs. It was for this reason that he immediately suggested that Renya go and get lost from here if he valued his life. Renya said that he refused, because if he ran away now, what kind of a man would he be after that? The mercenary started laughing loudly, saying that the boy was probably just jealous. Someone else said with a grin that so be it, he would share if the little guy was so restless. The leader said that he had already thought that Renya was a sneaky brat with a stick, pretending to be a hero. After all, if he had grabbed that stick, the guy would have been finished right away. Afterwards, still laughing, he asked Renya how the guy himself felt about it. Renya looked at the mercenary leader with surprise and anger. Renya's expression darkened noticeably and his grip tightened on his shinai. Then he took a few steps closer to the mercenaries, and in particular to their leader. Renya asked to repeat the words that the royal mercenary had just said regarding his stick. The man did not understand at first, and then with an arrogant grin said that if he grabbed it, the boy would be finished. Renya raised his shinai up, pointing it at the leader of the royal mercenaries. The leader was surprised, after which he immediately asked the young man what he was doing. Renya said that he would do as the chief wished. The young man would allow him to grab the stick, and in return he would knock out of him all the stupidity that was contained in the mercenary's head. The head of the mercenaries began to laugh loudly, saying that the guy was a real suicide. He really thought that the young man in front of him was crazy or stupid by nature. In response to all the smirks, Renya remained silent, holding his shinai. The mercenary suddenly grabbed it sharply, saying that he did it. Afterwards, he asked what Renya was going to do now. Renya spun the shinai in his hand to free it from the mercenary's grip. After that, when the weapon was free, the boy pointed it towards the mercenary's Adam's apple. All the head of the mercenaries managed to do was smile stupidly and be surprised at what had happened. Sinai hit him hard in the neck, completely cutting off the bandit's breath. The mercenary began to quickly fall on his back, offering no resistance. Rena completely neutralized him, which caused shock among the two defending girls and the rest of the mercenaries. One of the men said that this couldn't be. Rena calmly said that this would teach this impudent fellow a good lesson in life. The tension began to mount very quickly. The mercenaries started swearing and then started grabbing their weapons. They were all aggressive, and one of them, raising his knuckles, said that now the guy was definitely finished. He managed to turn his shinai towards the running man, after which he swung and hit the man in the forehead. The blow was so strong that the skin immediately vibrated, and the eyes began to move in different directions. Realizing the power of the weapon that the goddess had given him, Renya smiled widely, after which he said that this was not just any stick, but his full-fledged weapon, which he called a sword. Realizing that it was not worth attacking one by one because the guy really wielded his wooden sword quite well, they began to surround him from four sides, saying that they were not to be trifled with. They continued cursing the boy, throwing verbal dirt at him. They also intimidated the young man. Renya only told him not to come within his reach. It was quite a serious warning. Renya felt one of the mercenaries rush towards him, after which he immediately received the same blow to the neck. With only 3 of them left, the mercenaries knew that their chances were still high against one guy who was good at swinging a stick. The next one decided to attack, and immediately got hit in the face with a stick. Renya said, "Continue" again, calling on the mercenaries to attack or stop. The remaining 2 finally decided to act together, shouting for the boy not to dare to get cocky. Sion and Rona seemed to be frozen in place. The girls' mouths slightly opened in surprise, continuing to stare at the young man who had just defeated 5 mercenaries from the kingdom. Renya remained in the center of a circle where he fought back. He slowly lowered his shinai, then exhaled. The mercenaries lay on the ground, groaning heavily, putting his sword back to his belt. Renya told the mercenaries that they didn't seem to be listening to him at all. The boy added that it might not look like much of a weapon, but it could hurt. Looking around, Renya continued to say that usually stabbing techniques are forbidden to use until a certain age, and this was not for show. Suddenly, Renya looked back, hearing footsteps. It was Roja and Sion. Rona immediately apologized, thanking the guy for saving them. The girl added that it was only thanks to him that they were not harmed. Renya smiled shyly, saying that he had done nothing wrong. The guy even said that he thought he had butted in where it wasn't his business, but he couldn't have done otherwise either. Rona bowed her head and told the guy not to be modest, because he really helped them. Looking at her, Renya thought that he really understood why those guys were hitting on the girls. Xian also approached Rainier and thanked him in turn. She said that the 2 of them would never have been able to deal with such a threat as 5 mercenaries. Renya began to feel uneasy. The boy said that those 5 weren't even armed. Xian explained that the warriors of the mercenary kingdom were masters of grappling when it came to hand-to-hand combat. Shinon said that the guy was a bit strange. She continued to stare, basing her assumption on the fact that he didn't even know anything about the mercenary kingdom. Renya looked away and said that he was an alien. The girls were surprised, saying that they had heard of such a thing before, but had never met one before. The blonde with long straight hair said she was Rona Chevalier, a novice nun. The brunette continued, saying her name was Sion Femme-Fatale, and she is a swordswoman, also a newbie. The boy smiled and said his name was Kunugi. Renya, and you can call him simply Renya, it's more convenient. The girls thought this name was very strange, so exotic. Afterwards, Renya looked at the mercenaries and said that it was time for them to leave here. These guys were only unconscious, but if they woke up, they could be in serious trouble. The girls supported the young man. They started to move away, and Renya, who still doesn't understand the rules here, asked the girls if it would be okay if they left the 5 of them alone. Rona said that it was very dangerous to be in the forest, but they started it first. Sion began to tell about their world. It was called Eridora, and was divided into 5 continents: Northern, Southern, Western, Eastern, and Central. Now they are on the Eastern continent, where people live. While the girl continued talking about how each continent had its own clan with different races, Renya continued thinking about the mercenaries who could be eaten by monsters if they were knocked out for more than 10 minutes. The boy realized that he was acting too calmly for someone who had just killed 2 people. Who was he in his past life? Rona suddenly distracted him, asking how long ago the boy had arrived in this world. Renya replied that it had happened quite recently, literally just now. Rona's mouth opened slightly in surprise, and then she immediately covered it with her hand. The girl said that it was very impressive. Renya asked the reason why it was impressive. Sion said that aliens are usually confused when they first arrive here. What impressed them was that the boy was able to quickly get his bearings. Some parts of the girl's body were not well covered, so it made Renya a little embarrassed. When he called the girl Ro, she smiled and said that her close people called her that. Renya covered one new, carefully trying to hide his emotions, and then said that he understood. Embarrassed, Renya began to ask the girl about what they were doing here. Rona replied that they were members of the Adventurers Guild of the Trident, or Trident Principality. They had received a quest from the guild, which had a decree to explore and capture a goblin settlement. Renya thought that he had been receiving a lot of messages lately. He opened the panel and saw that all the messages were about goblins that were harassing a growing village on the edge of the forest. Looking at the characteristics, Renya saw that the goblins were quite weak individually, but became a problem when they formed a group. It was a humanoid monster, and they could increase their population to 100 individuals. Sion suddenly turned around, and Renya saw that the girl had a sad look. She said that there were originally 8 of them. It seemed that after that, Renya began to understand something. The guy started counting quickly, bending his fingers, and then started saying something. Sion understood what he was talking about and waited for the question, immediately saying that the mercenaries were also part of their group. Renya smiled a little awkwardly, then said that guys like these must be pretty hard to work with, since they're such slobs. Sion clenched her fist and said that Renya seemed to be reading her mind. Rona joined the conversation, turning to Renya. The girl said that in any case, instead of stopping in the village, the boy should get on a horse-drawn carriage that would arrive in a couple of days. Rona insisted that the boy needed to go to the principality. Renya asked what the girls would do. Sion said that they would stay and continue their research on goblins. Rona smiled and said that it seemed that it would not be possible to pacify the monsters, and therefore they should at least gather information, because they would not be able to return back. Renya told the girls that he thought this idea was also a bit of a dud. Sion said that if they returned empty-handed, then finding another job would be difficult for them in the future. Rona supported this, explaining that if they were despised, it would be the end of their work as adventurers. And if the goblins got too wild, the villagers would be in trouble. Renya stopped smoothly and started rubbing his chin. The girls looked at him questioningly. Renya said that everything was decided, and he would help Sion and Rona complete the task. Renya really wanted to help them. The girl explained that since the guy was not a member of the guild, he would not receive any prize money for it. Renya smiled and shrugged, saying that he didn't care. In return, the guy just wanted to get a little more information about the world he found himself in. Sion was a little confused, gesturing with her hand. She said it was no problem, but the guy was asking for too little payment for risking his life. Renya smiled even wider, saying that he was completely fine with it. Since he had no information about this world at the moment, it was more valuable to him than any money at the moment. Rona smiled, winking at her friend. She said in a very calm voice that everything would be fine. The girl also added that Renya showed that he was a good person. Sion lowered her head, slightly dejected, and then said that Rona was probably right. However, something prevented her from giving a positive answer right away. This is exactly how Kunugi Renya, met two beauties and began his new life, which already promised a sea of adventures and new acquaintances in another world. A small village appeared on the horizon. They started to come out of the forest thicket, which was quite large. Sion smiled and announced in a satisfied voice that they were already there. Rona also smiled, but remained silent. Sion turned to Renya and said that this was not an ordinary village for a girl. This was the place where they had once grown up. The village itself was indeed very small. Rona finally started talking, adding that they were born here and still live here. The nun also added that Sion had already recovered from that fight, which was good because the girl didn't get along well with men. Rona continued to look into Renier's eyes, noting a little nervously that she thought they were the same age as him. Sion had already walked a little ahead, so she hadn't heard this conversation. After Rona's words, Renya answered a little awkwardly that their ages were indeed close. In fact, Renya thought he was 94, but she would never believe him. While Sion was talking to a man working in the field, Renya continued to think. He thought that in his past life, he must have been some kind of weirdo, and that's why he was reincarnated here. Renya didn't understand at all what this rebirth was about, and then a picture of how everything was on the day of his death and what he saw after began to flash before him. A very young girl with a wreath on her head spread her arms and began congratulating Renya. Confetti floated around, and the girl announced that he had received the right to be reborn in another world. The girl started to giggle, covering her face with her hands, and then asked if Renya was happy. Without waiting for an answer, the girl said that he was probably happy, so she was always at his service. Snapping her fingers a couple of times, the girl shouted for the angels to sing together and bless Renya before she was sent to a new stage in life. Renya didn't understand what was going on, and the girl started telling him everything. She explained that Renya died at the age of 94, and that he also had amnesia. She also said that Renya had lived for quite a long time and still hadn't found a girlfriend. She told Paul that she was also quite old and had never dated a guy. She shuddered and asked if it was hard to find someone at that age. Afterwards, the girl said that Renya would have knowledge from his past life in his new one, and it would help him. After reincarnation, the boy would look like an 18-year-old in both body and soul. This amused Renya, and the girl asked if he felt young already. Continuing to smile sarcastically, she said that it was quite cool, because Renya was an old man. Renya didn't appreciate the joke, and then he hit her with all his might. The girl didn't even have time to finish speaking before she flew away in the other direction. Renya began to lose his temper, saying that she was already boring him. The young man clenched his fist and asked her not to talk about him without permission and to shut up. Afterwards, he threatened the girl that he could explain everything to her in detail again if she wanted it. Afterwards, Renya asked what else he wanted to know, where he was. The girl said that there were no people here, only them, the angels. All this was God's domain, and before him now was the one and only beautiful goddess, because she was the creator of all that exists. Renya exhaled, saying without any emotion that it was all cool. The goddess didn't really like his meager reaction, so she said that the guy could move for the sake of decency. The girl raised her index finger, after which she said that Renya would be reborn in another world and would live there. So let his second life begin. Renya looked at the goddess in shock, asking why him. The girl grinned, saying that his soul was chosen, and therefore the guy was unspeakably lucky. The goddess told the boy that they were now behind the wall of the universe. Only some spirits can go to other worlds. Usually the soul goes through the wall and goes to another world. But Renya's soul is special. His soul bounced off the barrier, giving the boy a second chance at life. The goddess pointed her finger at Renya and said that he had managed to resist the wall, so she would give him a second chance. Afterwards, she extended her hand to him and joyfully told him that his body, mind, and spirit were completely purified, and a new soul would go to another world. As it turned out of all 5.63 million people, Renya was chosen to become a hero. The goddess continued to congratulate him, saying how individual Renya was. The guy was silent for a while. then began to slowly say that he understood the goddess. Renya looked at her and said that now they could assume that his soul would go to another world. The young man wondered how the goddess intended to use him next. The girl stared at him, saying laconically that absolutely nothing for Renya. The goddess immediately asked what Renya had originally thought. Renya stood silently for a while, and then finally lost his temper. He grabbed the goddess by the head and told her not to joke with those who were already dead. The goddess began to urge him to stop, saying that there were already reincarnated people like him in this world. She also said that there was a reason why he had to be reborn. Renya still wouldn't calm down, saying that he had lived his 94 years with dignity, and she was starting to piss him off. Renya said that maybe he didn't even need a new life and a new body. The goddess asked Renya to finally let her go, and then she would explain everything. When the young man let go of her, she raised her finger and said that she was ready to give a special resource in exchange for rebirth. Renya asked the goddess in surprise what resource she was talking about. The girl said that they call everything in this or that world. Resources including human souls, water, and air. In the new world, everything is made of the same resources as in the one where Renya lived. She pointed to the map and said that the young man will go to a world called Eldora, and there is an extreme shortage of resources there. The map will now display the races living in this world. Eldora has southern, northern, western, eastern, and central continents, and dragon tamers, humans, elves, demons, and beastmen live on them. She poked at a certain square and said that you can play with your lands and attack other people's territories. But, to tell the truth, this has been a fairly common occurrence lately. There are a lot of wars going on there now. Also, each territory has a chief who is revered as a god. The war is being waged for resources, which are constantly in short supply now. These 5, who are revered in their continents, act as commanders of armies. They rule their people like puppets without brains of their own. Renya lost his temper again, because he was tired of listening to this nonsense. He grabbed the goddess's head and asked what business it was of his. The girl screamed at him again for him to stop. Renya let her go and the goddess fell on all fours. The girl said that earlier, as she had already said. She had sent 5 people there and made them commanders of each race. Now she doesn't know at all how to stop their chaos. Renya said that these people should be lower than God. In his opinion, they could just be kicked out and that would be the end of it. The goddess said that she could, of course, take power from them. But in that case, 80% of the world would be destroyed. Even though she didn't want it, Renya's words somehow gave her a reason to think. She said that, in principle, she could do it right now. The goddess opened the panel, but Renya immediately asked her to stop. Folding his hands together across his chest, Renya began to think. He still didn't understand how all this could be connected to the lack of resources she had spoken of earlier. The goddess perked up a little because she saw that Renya was starting to show interest, and then she immediately continued her story. The girl said that in the new world, souls are called Linus. The world is designed in such a way that these souls are constantly going through the process of reincarnation. For this reason, if Renya dies in battle, he will simply be reborn. All this also applies to cases when, for example, a dragon eats him or simply crushes him. There are also goblins and orcs who can also kill him. In general, souls were reborn again and again. Now the Lushies have begun to refuse to go through all this. Many souls have begun to come here, but do not want to be reborn. But it is necessary. Because of this, the world's resources have begun to rapidly deplete. The goddess said that they begin asking for help from special souls, who, like Renya, stood out from the rest and were chosen. But the results were not very encouraging. In the end, she managed to convince 5 of them, and they all became commanders in this world. All that was needed was to direct this world in the right direction. But this takes time. The goddess pressed her hands to her chest and said that she wanted to ask Renya for a favor. He needed to stall for time until she could come to an agreement with the commanders of each race. In other words, she asks to go into this world and save it. Renya scratched his head, saying that now he understood everything. He also added that he didn't have to figure it all out. The goddess began to squeeze them tightly, saying that Renya was her only hope. Only he, supposedly, could save this world. With tears in her eyes, she begged him to be reborn, saying that he simply had to do so. The goddess spoke of the weak inhabitants women and children of this world, who would inevitably perish if no intervention was made. Renya continued to suspect that something was wrong. He asked the goddess to confess everything, but the girl again said that they had been looking for the chosen one among all 5 million people for a long time, and it was very difficult. Renya did not believe the girl, and again tore her off the ground. The goddess began to shout that she was apologizing, and if he let her go, she would tell everything. The young man said that she was already annoying him. Exhaling heavily, the guy said that the girl was a goddess. He urged her to tear herself away from the place where she was sitting and come to her world to restore order there and stop wars. The girl said that she is a god, so her power is too great. One wave of her fingernail will be enough to wipe the inhabitants off the face of the earth. Even monsters consider her simply super strong. Simply put, the world would be destroyed if she interfered. Renya indignantly exclaimed that he did not want to rule the world and did not care about the problem of its resources. The goddess thought for a moment, then said that Renya, as far as she remembered, loved to eat deliciously in his past life. The girl said that there are a lot of tasty things on Eldora that you can't find on Earth. Now one of the main arguments and convictions of the goddess was exactly this. Try to fill this life with new sensations that never existed in the old one. Renya said that it all sounded good and the goddess caught him when she mentioned the goodies. The girl was delighted, clasping her hands. But then Renya added that it was still not enough. Renya spread his hands and said that he had some guesses about super cool abilities in this world that were not forbidden. The guy said that food was good, but he would need strength to search for it. The goddess snorted, saying that the guy didn't care at all that the resources were depleted. Then she said that she didn't care and would consider it an additional expense because she was a god. The girl said that she agreed. After that, she officially addressed Renya, asked the guy what ability he wanted for himself. Renya smiled, folding his hands together. Suddenly, he was distracted by a voice that kept calling the guy. When he came to his senses, he turned around abruptly and saw Sion calling him. The girl asked if Renya had even been listening to her all this time. They walked into a small courtyard where children were playing. Sion said that they were already there, but they still couldn't relax. Renya apologized, then asked what Sion had been talking about. Sion threw out her hand and repeated that they would have to deal with a group of goblins. She then pointed to what Renya was using and said that they would need a suitable weapon for this. Renya said that he already has his own sword. Sion raised her index finger and said that Renya was certainly quite skilled with this sword, since she realized it when she saw the guy in action. With a shine eye, a guy quickly gets exhausted, and besides, it can break. Rona looked down a little uncertainly, then said that in her opinion, if it was about Renya, then everything would be fine, and she wanted to believe it, although she constantly added probably when she spoke. Afterwards, Sheen said that if the boy could hurt a goblin with this sword, then let him use it. Then she added that Renya was quite strong, which made their common task easier. Shun also said that there was something else. She thought that their soldiers might need equipment, and the things in the bags stink and are of no use to them. She decided to give it all to them. Rona happily exclaimed that they wouldn't have to spend any money. It was decided. It was time to change. Renya folded his hands and then thought that these two really couldn't stand men. If only everything was okay with him. Afterwards, Sion herself approached Renya and said that she had decided to give him her spare sword. She had come to this conclusion because if the guy's Shinai suddenly gave out, he would have a backup. Rona stood and watched from the side, adding that it would be the right decision. After all, at least then you wouldn't have to worry about the guy getting lost in the battle. Renya pulled the blade out of its sheath. Sion watched happily as the young man assessed her blade. Soon she, slightly clasping her hands, asked how he liked the sword. Renya continued to examine the blade carefully, saying that it seemed to be quite good. Renya himself thought that it was as sharp as the Japanese ones. Who would have thought, because it can cut through an enemy. The sword was also adorned with a beautiful massive hilt, completely engraved with dragon patterns. Renya said that the blade looked quite expensive. Sion smiled. The girl said that this sword was a family heirloom. The blade itself had broken many times, so it was often replaced. Sion also apologized for giving such a sword to Renya. The boy said that he would gladly take it. Shun, seeing this, began to wonder why Renya was the owner of a bottomless vault. She said that he was just lucky, and she envied him. Then the girl asked how to get the sword back now. Renya started moving his hand through the air again, where his panel was. The guy said that it was done the same way, because the sword was just lying in his inventory. Sion said that they called it a bottomless storage, and it was a very rare thing. Renya stared at the girls, listening to them. Rona chimed in and said that she had heard that the amount of things stored in it was unlimited. Rona was also jealous, because she had to carry a lot in her bag. Renya smiled and said that if the girls wanted, he could help them with their things on the way back. Sion thanked him, saying that she wouldn't have to carry them anymore. Suddenly the guy felt something. Sion and Rona tensed up a bit, then carefully began to approach the window where Renya was now standing. Sion asked what was wrong, to which Renya replied that he didn't know yet. The guy clearly felt something, a certain aura, that was coming from the forest. Sion thought out loud that this was some kind of ability of foreigners. Rona also stuck to the window in surprise. Renya explained that the goblins had already made their move, and there was no doubt about it. But then he added that, unfortunately, he could not see anything yet. Sion immediately turned to the nun, calling out to her. Rona immediately understood and folded her hands together, pressing them to her chest. The girl began to pray, asking the higher being to show them the enemies. A barely noticeable aura began to emanate from the girl, which quickly spread throughout the house and began to move further, making its way into the deep thickets of the forest. Rona seemed to have entered some kind of astral plane, after which she could observe what was permitted to her in the form of a spirit. The girl said that Renya was right, and there really was something hostile in the forest. Rona also added that there were quite a few of them, but she couldn't say for sure. She thought the number was closer to 50. She also saw more monsters, but they were too far away from her. Renya pointed at Rona, began to ask Sion what was happening now. Sion said that this is the art of the monks who serve the gods, and it is called law. Those with this class can use the spell reconnaissance, which is what Rona used now. It helps to study the area for danger. After that, Sion suddenly became angry, saying that a group of 50 monsters, even if they were goblins, was much larger than usual. Since there were so many of them, they probably wanted to take over the entire village. Things were bad, and what made it worse was that such a large gang of 50 individuals would certainly have a leader. A group of 15 individuals always has a goblin leader. Sion became flustered and then swallowed loudly. Even though she knew the threat was great, she had to act. This was their village. Sion began giving orders. All men were to be prepared for battle. Sion said that today was clearly not their day. She apologized and asked if Renya was sure that she still wanted to help. Renya said that he would definitely stay here, because he did not understand how he could leave the girls and the residents in such a situation. Renya asked what he should do. Sion said that the enemy was ready for battle and armed. Because of their numbers, they would definitely not get help from the military. And besides, they had a commander who was stronger than the rest. Therefore, they need as many people as possible. But alas, there are only 10 men in the village who could fight. Meanwhile, Rona was already notifying everyone to go into their houses and close the doors. The monsters greatly outnumber them, and only the brave will go to the front lines. Sion added that he would be being completely honest if he said that the fight would not be easy. Renya immediately asked the girl what would happen if they suddenly lost. Sion's expression immediately changed, as if she was remembering, but then said that she didn't want to talk about it. It was all pretty obvious, because the villagers would be food, and there would only be a pile of corpses left here. The young women would probably be eaten or worse. In short, Renya will witness people dying before his eyes. The guy thought about it and remembered that the goddess asked him to try not to die. Nothing terrible, of course, but the guy will forget everything when he wakes up. Renya put his elbow out, leaning against the window, and said that this was complete madness. The guy added that he had a feeling it would be quite funny. Sion immediately said that now was not the time for jokes, because everything was very serious. There were indeed many lives of ordinary civilians at stake. Renya thought that it was just a battle, and fighting on the side of the weak was a just and sometimes necessary thing. Sion suddenly looked at the boy who was still looking out the window. She widened her eyes at him, seeing Renya standing there and laughing evilly. Sion didn't understand the reason and carefully asked the boy for the reason. The youth felt that the evil presence in the forest was growing with each passing minute. Renya also thought that the fight was going to be quite interesting. He looked over and saw the locals shaking in fear. Rona gathered as many as she could, about 20 men and young boys. They handed out some weapons and clothes they had on them, but many fought in their usual peasant robes. And it turns out that the group that was going to fight is 20 villagers with weapons of different ages, 2 girls who are new to the guild and 1 lost person in the person of Renya. The opponents were quite small, but they were goblins, and there could be too many of them. And besides, as they said earlier, they definitely have a commander. Most likely, capturing a village with different food for monsters is the whim of this leader. Renya said that they must be crazy to win with such a difference in strength. It was obvious that everyone was worried. Sion, in response to the guy's words, said that she still could not calm down. The girl thought that Renya, apparently, was used to this kind of situation. Renya closed his eyes, clutching his head. After a few seconds, the guy said that he didn't know exactly, or rather, he didn't remember, but he was absolutely sure that they would win. Sion exchanged glances with her friend Rona, and then began to calm down a little. After exhaling, the girl said that such words encouraged her, and it seemed like they should rely on Renya again. Their peaceful dialogues did not last long. The conversation was interrupted by a quick sound that immediately attracted attention. It was an arrow that fell a few meters from the group of defenders. But the arrow was not the only one fired. This one, the first one, seemed to become a sign for the inhabitants. Soon they saw hail flying from above, after which they immediately prepared for battle. Lost their focus a little and their morale began to drop. One of the men shouted that they were in trouble. Renya just grinned and said that he would see. Sion turned to the villagers behind the vanguard and shouted that the battle would be fierce. The girl ordered everyone armed with a bow to open fire. The village's archers began loading their bows with trembling hands, which slowed them down considerably. One of them cursed for a long time after realizing that he had broken his bow. Sion looked at the whole pitiful sight, realizing that their people were not at all prepared for battle. The girl cursed, then looked ahead, gritting her teeth. Renya turned around, chuckling a little. He said that in such circumstances they should go on the attack, because that was the only way they would have a chance. The guy said that he would now show how to beat goblins. The boy didn't wait for anything else. Renya simply rushed forward, throwing the axe to the side. Sion began screaming the boy's name, not understanding what this madman was doing. The goblins, seeing the boy rushing straight into their arms, stopped and began to grimace, talking about something in their own language, and laughing nastily. They thought that the young man would be easy prey. As Renya approached the goblin horde, he swung his axe up and slashed at one of the neighing goblins, causing its head to fly off its shoulders and roll a bit on the ground. Some goblins continued to laugh, but those who were standing next to Renya began to open their eyes wide, not understanding what was happening. The enraged Renya began to cut everyone indiscriminately. In order not to drag this out for too long, Renya was quite precise, limiting himself to just 1 blow per goblin, and most often to the head. The monsters began to realize that the battlefield was changing dramatically. Renya continued to smile aggressively, telling the monsters that their laughter and enjoyment had truly angered him. So Renya added that now, let him laugh and enjoy like the goblins did. After these words, the 4 goblins rushed to attack the boy. Sion, who witnessed all this while staying with the rest of the village's defenders, thought that Renya was standing right in their way. She thought that he was too bizarre and probably wanted to die. Suddenly, Sion heard Rona's scream, which loudly warned that goblins were attacking from the other side. About half of the horde was running towards them, and the girls prepared to meet them. Renya seemed to have fallen into a battle rage. His eyes quickly followed the opponents, and the young man himself, taking out the sword that Sion had given him, continued to reduce the number of goblins with both hands. Stopping another goblin's attack, Renya squeezed his weapon with his own, then delivered a stabbing blow straight into the goblin's heart. Pulling out his sword, the boy noticed that the goblin was still alive. Renya was a little sad that his sword didn't pierce that worthless heart. Swinging it again, the guy hit the head with it, saying that he would just cut them into pieces. When the young man finished off that very goblin, he looked around, realizing that the goblins were no longer attacking him themselves. Renya began to provoke them, saying that if they did not attack, then he himself would take care of it. Renya rushed into the very center of the crowd again, continuing to hack at the goblins. He shouted that he was their enemy and that he had come specifically to have fun and kill. It really began to seem as if Renya was getting a thrill out of this. He kept repeating and repeating, pointing his finger at the goblins, naming them next. And then instant death comes. The guy threw the sword over his shoulder and continued to call on the monsters to attack him. Sion and Rona were also fighting the goblins in the meantime. The village men retreated a little to their houses, deciding to intervene only in case of a hopeless situation. Suddenly, two goblins rushed at Sion at once, attacking the girl almost simultaneously. Dodging the first one, Sion put her sword down, holding the blade of the second goblin. Sion pushed the goblin away, who was still inferior to her in strength due to his size. The girl convinced herself out loud that she was not afraid of killing, and then cut down one of the attackers with a blow of her sword. The next goblin decided to try to attack the girl in a jump, but Sion managed to react, striking him in the stomach. Since the girl was already a little exhausted, she left the blade in the monster's stomach at the moment of the strike. Rona delivered the finishing blow to the goblin, who remained alive after being hit in the stomach. When the mace strike finished him, Rona called Sion quickly to be careful. Sion, slightly sweating, apologized to her friend for not being careful. Thanking Rona, the blonde told the swordsman that it was too early to say that. Rona gripped her mace tightly, raising it a little higher, saying that they had to survive this. The goblins began to gather around, and Sion said that they would definitely try. As he continued to deal a crushing defeat to all the goblins that dared to attack Renya, the boys suddenly heard the whistle of metal in the air. Having dealt with the threat, Renya finally looked at the sword more closely, exhaling heavily. The guy thought that the sword worked anyway and was useful. Suddenly, he saw someone bigger than the rest of the rabble in his field of vision. Renya looked over and smiled, saying that someone who was truly strong had finally appeared. A muscular goblin, who was twice or even 2.5 times taller than all the others, stood silently and stared at the young man. Renya thought that this was their leader. The monster let out a deafening roar, causing the goblins and the fighting newbies to turn around. Shiwan shouted that it was the goblin leader. The girl asked Renya to get out of there immediately. She saw that the boy's sword that she gave him was broken. Afterwards, she immediately said that it would be impossible to fight with a broken sword, and Shion assured that she would fight the monster herself later. Rene continued to hold the piece of blade that was left in his hand. The youth smiled and told Shion not to be stupid. Lead if she did not finish her fight. Who will deal with the leader? Wiping the blood off the wreckage, Renya stared at the leader, waiting for his next move. The monster looked around, then began swinging his large saber. Renya realized that his opponent was quite slow, even too slow for a young man. The only thing was that he was strong and had a long sword that could reach him from a great distance. When the sword landed on the ground, Renya managed to jump back, but he also felt the momentum coming from the weapon. The boy thought again that this was a very heavy and slow attack. It is because of the length and width of the sword, as well as the force being applied and the size of the goblin, that if it hits even once or slightly grazes Renya, it will be fatal. But it was necessary to try. The main task that Renya set for himself was to reduce the distance, since his weapon was now only about 20 centimeters long. When the guy rushed forward, he immediately noticed that the goblin leader was starting to attack, and a horizontal one at that, which could cause a lot of problems for the guy. However, Reyna managed to dodge by ducking to the ground and then rushed forward. The guy thought that he should attack quickly and then quickly went behind the leader. But something, unfortunately, did not go according to the plan that Renya had already imagined. The guy suddenly noticed that behind the huge goblin there was another small one. Renya managed to react properly. With the rest of his sword, he struck right into the small goblin's armed hand, after which the guy managed to intercept the enemy's blade. Moreover, Renya was able to do it so quickly and automatically that the leader still hadn't had time to come to his senses and turn around. Then the guy delivered his blow right into the commander's bare back. It managed to pierce his flesh, and quite easily, but it was not enough. The goblin leader continued to stand on his own 2 feet, shouting and waving his arms in different directions, trying to knock the young man down. After a couple more pinpoint blows, the leader was no longer able to stay on his feet, after which he fell to the ground with a crash. Renya threw his leg over his shoulder, saying that he now had no way to protect the lower half of his body. Renya wasn't sure the goblin understood him, but he told him that it was bad to have the sword he had. The boy knew that a goblin's blade couldn't even leave a dent, but this sword of poor quality could cut. After saying these words, the boy thrust part of the sword into the goblin leader's neck. This blow certainly ended the leader's life before he could even scream. Renya then reached for the goblin's long sword. He lifted it off the ground and said that he would now use this trash to finish the fight. The boy smiled madly as he looked at the remains of the goblins, and then said that it was not over yet. What is this? This is another world where you can see frightened faces and blood, and also the hoarse sounds of goblins before they die, as a result of a stabbing blow, and also their faces, which with their whole appearance demonstrate horror, pain, and fear. Renya began to crush everything that was in his path again, begging to share it all with him. They shared the pain, horror, and fear that he immediately encountered in the first days of his stay in the new universe where God sent him. Nevertheless, Renya wanted more and more of it. After a few hours, dawn slowly began to break over the village. Rona slowly walked on her feet, asking if her friend Sion was still alive. Sion couldn't catch her breath, sitting on the ground. The girl said it was a miracle. Sion looked at Rona, and then began to look at the clearing where the main battle was taking place. Sion slowly said that they were alive for one reason or another, and that very reason now stands among the mountain of dead goblins, silently greeting the dawn. The villagers and two newcomers were saved thanks to Renya. For Renya, at that moment, it was truly a separate kind of fun. It was as if the guy was punishing the goblins for making the wrong attacks. Throughout most of the fight, the boy continued to talk to them, calling the goblins stupid, and also notifying them when he was attacking someone from behind. The goblins continued to jump, dying one after another. Meanwhile, the goddess was watching the young man they had chosen from her divine space. She grabbed her head, screaming that it was really annoying her. The goddess propped her head up with her palm and said that she thought so. The girl was already beginning to doubt whether it had been a good idea to erase all her memories from her past life. Watching the guy, it was clear that with his current abilities, even 100 goblins were no obstacle for him. Defeating such an army for Renya, it's a mere trifle. She suddenly remembered the moment when she asked Renya what abilities the young man wanted for himself. Renya stood in silence for a while, then voiced the list. The first thing Renya chose was health. The guy argued that he appeared in a new body, so he wants to keep it in this form for a long time. The goddess said a little disdainfully that Renya had chosen health over other abilities. She pointed her finger at her panel, asking the young man what else he needed. The goddess suddenly said that Renya was very greedy. The young man immediately began to lose his temper again, demanding that she keep quiet. Renya said that a cool appearance would not fill his belly. Renya thought about it and realized that at some point he would have to pay for food, so he needed an ability to get around that. The guy said that this world uses swords and magic, so there would be a lot of fighting. The goddess said that the guy's guess was correct, so he would need some equipment. She also said that Renya was more like a master swordsman, so he would have a sword. He doesn't remember this at all from his past life. She had calculated that it was Renya's body that remembered how to use the sword, so he would immediately understand when he fought. The goddess also thought for a moment, and then immediately said one important detail. The girl noted that there is no sword more exquisite than a Japanese sword, so she will give him an appraisal or blacksmith skill. Ren said that if there was magic in this world he wanted to master it. The goddess asked what kind of magic the boy wanted to master. Renya thought it was just magic, but it was all divided into elements: fire, light, water, air, darkness, and earth. Afterwards, the goddess asked what the guy thought was more important: strength or agility. At first, Renya thought it was agility, because strength never really mattered, especially in his situation. He laughed a little, because he had an idea in his head about it. He closed his eyes before letting out another chuckle and saying that he had the youthful body of an 18-year-old boy, so he could train to become stronger. The goddess smiled at him as she continued to make adjustments to her menu. She said that with her divine power, the boy would be able to achieve results quite quickly and easily. The girl also said that one of the mandatory functions that she will add is the language of another world. All this is in addition to the supporting ability. Then the boy received a small notification that his body was illuminated by a divine blessing. The goddess said that now the boy can use his abilities, which he chose. The girl continued to watch the cruelty that her chosen one demonstrated. She understood that the changes in his body also made him more cruel. The goddess came to the conclusion that she would not show him how to use the magic he had chosen. She smiled sadly, saying that he could be patient for a while, I guess. She believed that he would handle everything perfectly. Sion and Rona stood and looked at the village that was becoming visible under the still pale, if visible, sun. Sion said that there were 2 men left who had survived the defense of the village. Sion lightly rubbed her hand, which was grabbed by one of the goblins during the fight, and said that they had to leave this village to their mutual regret. She also added that the survivors who remained at all were simply a miracle in itself. It was thanks to the alien they met that the village remained undamaged. The nun added that she did not want to drag dead bodies after the war. Looking at Renya, she said that she would like to have a strong body and spirit like his. Renya continued to drag the bodies into a pile so he could burn them and not be satisfied with the smell of rot for the next week. Shiona told her friend that she had heard about a lot of good people in the world. Somehow, they were all saved because this guy was on their side. Rona continued to look at Renya and then said that it was so. The girl did not take her eyes off the alien. Suddenly, she began to quietly say that she had previously had thoughts about Renya, and they were confirmed, as she thought. The villagers brought a large pile of chopped firewood onto which Renya threw the calf. When Rona approached, the boy turned around and asked if he was doing everything right. Rona said yes. There were too many goblins, so they decided to burn them little by little. Rona suddenly said that this was a problem, although if they were not burned, they could rise again and attack people again. Renya was surprised that monsters were also subject to constant Sunday. Rona called Sion, who was supposed to set the bodies on fire. The girl straightened her arms and said that she was ordering a red dwarf to dance. After these rather strange words, fire began to burst from the girl's hands, which immediately came into contact with dry wood. Renya was surprised, asking Rona if she could do the same. Rona smiled shyly, saying that she was only a student for now, but that she would definitely become a priestess someday. A certain class had its own certain spells. Seeing Sion continue to fan the flames, Rona said that she could use a spell that would give her divine power. However, as a price to pay, she could not use other magic. Renya said that it was a surprise to him. The boy turned to Sion and said that he thought the girls specialized in fighting. Rona laughed, saying that was true. Sion, for some reason, started to lose her temper. After Rona said that this kind of magic is a basic level and can be learned by absolutely anyone, Sion jumped up, starting to get indignant. Sion asked her friend how she dared to say that. Afterwards, Sion herself said that she admitted the fact that her magic was not very good. Renya thought about it when he heard this. He remembered about magic, and then he realized that he should have asked that little girl about how to use it. Sion looked at the boy and said that maybe even he could use her. The girl proudly folded her arms and said that after they returned to Kukurika, she would introduce him to the magician who taught her. Renya suddenly pulled out a small bag which clanked loudly. The boy held it out, saying that he had some magic cores that he had collected from the goblins' bodies. The boy wanted to know what to do with them. Rona meekly folded her hands and said that they should present these cores to the guild as proof that they had completed the quest. The boy took out one of the stones and held it up. Looking at the crystal core glittering, Rona said that there were different ways to use them, but they were useless to them now. Sion looked into the distance happily. She saw several horse-drawn carriages heading through the forest toward their field. She exclaimed that the transport from Kukuriki was returning. Renya with them to show him as much of this world as possible, opening up everything new to him. They spent several days on the road until they reached the desired point. And the right point was the small trading town of Kukuriku, which Sion had mentioned earlier, and now they were finally at home. They stood in front of the gate and Sion solemnly pointed her hand forward. The population was quite small, about 10,000 people. The front line of this city was close to the forest. 2,000 soldiers under the direct control of the principality hold the defense of this city. The three of them walked past a bunch of small shops and low houses. Sion raised her hand up, saying that various goods were sold here, but there were no special goods here, although their business was thriving. They were approaching a small checkpoint where several well-armed guards were stationed. Renya looked around the city and thought that it looked rather elegant, but the wall did not look strong. Renya gazed at the landscape and architecture and walked calmly on. Suddenly, to his great surprise, 2 guards' pikes were crossed in front of him. Standing at the entrance to the city, The guards started saying that they had never seen the boy before. Another said that the boy should show his ID. Sion immediately intervened, apologizing to the guards. The girl added that he was a lost person. Rona also quickly jumped up to the guards and said that they got into trouble when they went on their mission for the guild. Pointing at Renya, the girl said that this guy helped them. The guards relaxed their grip on their spears a little. Rona meekly said that she fully vouched for the man. The guards cleared the way and apologized for the rudeness with which they had behaved. Renya quickly crossed the city wall, coming closer to Sion. He smiled and told the girl that they were like the city's elite. Sion smiled, saying that it is what it is. Renya looked at the two girls and thought that being an adventurer was a pretty great thing. He asked the newbies in the guild about it. Rona immediately said that the guy would also need to register so as not to get into such troubles again. Renya was surprised, not understanding why he needed all this. Rona, as always, smiled very sweetly and said that the adventurer's guild registration card can serve as an ID. At the same time, registration is very quick and easy. Renya thought that they were right and agreed since that was the case. Sion said that they would also go to the guild to hand in the quest. The young man thought that he had found a good company that was guiding him. The girl at the front desk took the request, carefully studying her notes. After a couple of minutes, she said that according to her information, the task of exploring the forest was supposed to be carried out by 8 people. Rona was alarmed, asking if it was necessary to report the situation that had happened to them. Sion turned her head to the girl at the counter and asked if it was a problem if there were actually fewer of them. Sion immediately asked the girl for help with something else. She pointed at Renya and asked her to help him with the registration. The girl also mentioned that they had asked a boy to help with a task. Sion also added that the guy seemed to be a lost one, as they called him here. They waved and went into the room. The girl at the counter handed over a piece of paper, asking Renya to fill out the registration form. Renya was a little confused, and then tensely asked the guild worker if the guy could fill out the form in Japanese. The girl asked him again about it. With a slightly confused expression, the guild worker said that she did not quite understand the young man. Then she asked him to fill out the form according to the instructions on the paper. Renya started writing and then noticed that his hand was producing symbols that looked very similar to Japanese. The guy thought that the skill of knowing languages was very useful. The guy started rereading a list of guild rules and they seemed a little strange to him. The first point stated that killing guild members is generally prohibited or there must be a very good reason for it. Well, the fourth rule stated that the main rule in the guild is that the leader of the group can defend his rights. That was all. Renya thought that it was not that much, and then handed the paper back. The girl smiled and said that there were also quite a lot of small rules. But creating a lot of rules for adventurers who specialize in fighting was considered pointless and troublesome. Renya smiled back and then said he understood. The girl announced that his application had been accepted, and now the guy could sit and wait for his card to be ready. Renya sat down on the bench and then became a little embarrassed. It was really very simple, just like Sion and Rona had told him earlier. Now the guy would be able to get at least some kind of document. After the girls left, Renya immediately asked if they were finished. Sion said they were, although it took a while to figure out the circumstances. The girl said that they should receive a good reward. In the end, they were awarded 12 gold coins, and that was their reward for the quest. Here, 1 gold coin was equal to 100 silver and 10,000 copper. Bread, for example, could be bought for 10 copper coins. Renya asked if that was too much. Rona smiled and said that the quest was originally for 8 people. They encountered a large number of goblins and ended up with so much. After the girls had a discussion, they decided to give half of the reward to Rainier. Renya felt very awkward and exclaimed that it was a lot. The guy said that he had done nothing to deserve this award. Sion began to calm the guy down, saying that they asked him for help. In fact, thanks to the guy, they completed the quest and also stayed alive. Sion added that according to her calculations, even a group of 6 people would not be enough to deal with such a large horde of goblins. Renya, on the other hand, almost single-handedly defeated the entire horde. Despite all this, the guy managed to deal with even their leader. Rose said that they would like to give him even more, because 2 people are also not enough to defeat the goblin horde. As the young waitress walked towards them, Rona said that they had one more small request. If Renya didn't mind, of course. Renya looked at the girls in surprise. Sion looked the boy in the eye with confidence, clasping their hands together, and then said that she and Rona would like Renya to join their group and continue traveling together. For Renya to take such a step was a serious responsibility. He had a task in this world that the goddess had sent him to. While he was thinking, Rona did not open her eyes from the guy, drinking coffee. To smooth things over a bit, Sion smiled softly and said that she was rather short-sighted, so she would appreciate it if he helped them. The girl said that she usually relied on Roar. Rona also smiled and said that she fully supported Sion's opinion and that it would be much more convenient for them to travel when there was a guy in the group. Renya drawled that everything was clear to him, after which he began scratching the back of his head. The guy thought that even if it was so, how could two girls trust him so easily? Nidome replied that they were no longer concerned about the matter. She also added that if the guy was untrustworthy, it would have become clear right away when he was running away from the goblin horde. Sion continued that, as she said before, she would tell everything she knew about this place. Also, it was more efficient for adventurers to hunt together than alone, so they decided that it was a good idea. Renya couldn't decide for a long time, but he also couldn't say that he was the goddess's messenger. He scratched his head again, and then said that this would certainly help everyone to acquire allies. After sitting there for a while, the boy shifted his gaze from Ro to Sion. Before finishing the conversation on this topic, Renya said that he needed one night to think about it. The girls showed Renya where he could rent a hotel. They had always lived there themselves, so they settled the young man next to them. It was already getting dark, and Renya was applying compresses to his aching body. Being Japanese, the guy knew that he wouldn't feel clean unless he washed himself in the bath. He would also like to somehow resolve this issue in the near future. But if we put aside all the everyday issues now, the guy still had to decide what to do with Sion and Rona's group. Of course, they were inferior to him in strength, but allies would not hurt him. However, these two were good people, and he knew it because they had been together for the last 2 days. But still, it seemed like they were trying to hide something. Suddenly, there was a knock in the room. Renya couldn't understand who could disturb him at such a late hour. Just in case, he hid the blade under his pillow. When the boy got up a little from the bed, he asked who was behind the door. A female voice said it was Ro. The girl apologized for coming at such a late hour. Then she asked if she could talk to Renya. The guy pulled a pillow over the blade, then told Ro to come in. He also added that the front door was unlocked. When the door to the room swung open, Ro slowly began to slip into the room, getting closer and closer to Renya. It was obvious that she was very embarrassed and nervous. The guy thought that this simply couldn't be. He immediately noticed the clothes Ro was wearing. Just a nightdress and nothing more. Ro began to climb onto the bed, slowly moving closer to Renya. Her breathing slowed, and at some point Renya began to feel his warmth. The girl slowly asked Renya if he knew what she wanted from him. Renya remained silent, also embarrassed and nervous. She came closer and closer, pronouncing the boy's name. Rona was very close and kept pushing Renya into a corner with her attractiveness. Renya knew that this was not what he wanted right now. Renya, if he knew what she wanted now. Renya smiled and said he had no idea. Rona leaned close to his ear and said that he was the one who made her go this far. The girl asked the young man not to be nervous, saying that she could please him. Renya said that he did not understand anything, because suddenly Ro sharply laid her eyes on him. Rona only laughed in response, blushing a little, and then said that a woman's heart is a very cruel thing. Renya realized that he would act a little differently, so he decided to let Ro get closer. Renya said that he agreed, then gently placed his hands on Ro's waist. The girl said in a drawn-out voice that Renya finally understood everything, then climbed a little higher. Rona slowly began to reach for Renya's lips, giggling softly. She also added that she really liked obedient boys. Renya thought that he expected nothing less from the nun, but their kiss did not happen, because Renya continued to sense a catch, because Ro started all this very suddenly. He hit her in the side, thereby putting the girl to sleep. Soon Rona began to come to her senses. She slowly opened her eyes, feeling that she was not feeling very well. Raising herself a little, she immediately realized where she was. She was still there, in Renya's room. The guy was standing over her, already dressed. Seeing that Rona had come to her senses, Renya began to come closer, saying that the girl had already woken up. Renya pulled out a chair and sat down, watching Rona closely. His gaze implied that the guy was clearly waiting for an explanation. Rona felt very ashamed and said that her plan had not worked. Renya cheerfully said that if he were much younger, Ro's plan might have worked, but it was too careless for her to mess with an old man who was 94 years old. Although, of course, it was necessary to admit that his body reacted. After these words, Rose sat quietly, making a completely blank face. After that, she squinted at who is 94 years old here. Ro immediately fell back, starting to laugh loudly. She screamed hysterically that this didn't fit with Renya at all. Renya completely stopped understanding what was happening now. Rona said she never thought Renya would be serious enough to make such a joke. Then she added that she had no choice but to give up. Renya thought to himself that he hadn't been joking. He didn't go into details, of course. Afterwards, Renya said that Rona wanted to give in, so it was time to say what she wanted to achieve by doing so. Rona said that she just really wanted Renya to accept the invitation to join the group that Sion had announced to him. That's all. Nothing that could harm the boy. Renya looked at the girl with a very serious look and then asked what would happen if he refused. Rona only smiled at him in response. Rona said that she just wanted Renya to join their group. Renya started asking why him, because the guy was sure that there were others that Ro could invite. Ro began to be touched, saying that Renya was acting very funny. She pressed her hands to her cheeks, after which she said that she was simply crazy about Renya. The young man began to get angry, asking Ro to answer seriously. Rona actually had several reasons why she thought Renya was almost the perfect candidate for their group. The first of them was that the boy had shown excellent skills in fighting goblins. Sion also confirmed this, being more of a warrior than Ro. It wasn't just his fighting skills, but also his personality, as he showed courage. The second reason was that he would never leave a girl in trouble. And of course, the third, Renya has never openly flirted with them, even though they are very beautiful. As she sees it, these three reasons make him the most suitable candidate. Rona laughed sheepishly, saying that she had only thought of pushing the sense of responsibility a little if the boy went too far. However, she said that it was best to drop the guy for now. Renya said that he also had a few questions because he wanted to know more about Ron and Sion. He also added that depending on the girl's answers, he might even forgive her. Rona smiled again, looked confidently into Renya's eyes, and said that she was ready. Renya hesitated a little, remembering what to ask first. Renya raised his finger and said that the first question would be to discuss the situation at the first meeting. She was very suspicious because the group consisted of 6 obviously dubious types and 2 female travelers. Renya said that he found it hard to accept that in principle. The clothes Rona was wearing at the time only suggested that the girl wanted something to happen. She really did seem to be begging to be attacked. Afterwards, Renya looked at Ro with a little indignation and asked if all the nuns in this world were like that. Rona began to blush even more at this conversation. She shrank a little, narrowed one eye, and told Renya not to look at her like that, because the guy was making her blush even more. Renya continued, coming to the second question. The guy said that they both have last names, and Sion has a middle name. This can somehow reflect on one's position in society. After all, the place where Renya himself was from, such people are most often the offspring of noble families. Suddenly, the guy remembered something else, after which he took out the sword that he took from Sion. Renya held it in front of him and said that if the quality of the blade itself was ignored, the pattern on the handle was of very high quality. Sion said that it was a very ordinary sword. Renya said that no matter how you look at it, using such a sword as a backup weapon was somehow too wasteful for an ordinary person. The fact that Sion, continues to use this sword while keeping this hilt suggests that it is a very important detail. Renya said that he suspects that this decoration is some kind of family crest. Ro began to look at Renya with great interest, saying that the guy's eye was like a diamond. She decided to joke, saying that Renya had already had his eye on him to sell to someone. Renya asked for silence because he was not finished yet. Ro began to moan tiredly. The young man said that the next detail caught his attention the most. In his mind, he immediately recalled the reaction of that guard when they entered Kukurika. Renya was not allowed in then, and after the intervention, his response was definitely too polite. Renya said that never in his life would an amateur traveler like Ro be allowed to stand as a guarantor for a suspicious person like him. Renya, of course, did not want to say this. but he had a hard time believing that travelers were held in such high esteem here. That is why he thought there was some other reason why he was so polite. Ro leaned back on the bed, saying that the guard had simply fallen under her spell. The girl also added that it seems she had tasted sin by following the righteous path. Renya elaborated, saying that the guards here were some kind of elite. There were also a few other things that bothered him, but they were less significant, so he would leave them out for now. The girl asked what he was thinking about doing next. Renya said that if these 3 points are taken into account, he concludes that they are both of noble birth and quite famous. Moreover, there's a certain reason why they cannot say this. At this point, Rona began to listen more attentively to his words. Renya said that he thought it was some kind of complicated nonsense related to their high social status. Rona said that such curiosity would not make the boy popular. She also added that he should join the military police. Renya replied that she could continue to laugh at him and mislead him, but he didn't care. Still sitting in his chair with his arms hanging down, Renya announced that as long as he had these suspicions, he would not consider their offer to join, because he would prefer not to get involved in other people's problems. A tense silence fell between them. Renya continued to stare at Ro without closing his eyes. It was clear that the girl was gradually starting to feel uneasy. Ro suddenly exclaimed, rubbing her head. Exhaling, she admitted that everything had really gone wrong. She really believed that she was such a good actress. Renya would find out everything anyway. She could no longer try to play on his thoughts about her body, which probably made the guy even more reliable. Rona put her hands together and said that Renya would now get the truth he wanted. She suggested that they forget about it for now, saying that Sion was indeed of noble birth. No matter how you look at it, the girl can't say more. Renya said that she wasn't a nun, apparently. Even if that was true, what was the point of the stupid power she used earlier? Rona smiled and hesitated a bit. Then she admitted that she had indeed lied when she said that she was working as an apprentice to a monk. She was a knight, and her main job was to protect Sion. Rona also added that she had more than enough experience in the military field, at least to easily deal with those 6 unarmed mercenaries. Renya asked what about Sion then, since she couldn't have done it alone. Ro said that she was just playing her part to make Sion develop a sense of danger, and Renya was right about her clothes. Now Renya was ready to give the full picture. He said it was something like this. A wealthy girl who had long dreamed of traveling decided to go on one. Rona said she couldn't answer that. Ro had said that if Renya joined their group, she was sure that everything would gradually become clear to him. The young man clutched his head, thinking that he did not want to get involved in all this. Renya also recalled that he only wanted to live peacefully. He suddenly jumped up, saying that Sion was apparently also part of the plan to sneak into his room. Rona immediately stopped the young man, so that he would not start to get confused in his thoughts again. Ro said that Sion is a pure and innocent girl, and most likely, she sincerely believes that Renya is needed by her. Afterwards, Rona turned away and said that this was the reason she had to sneak in here, because of Sion, but without her knowledge. The girl also added, looking away, that it would be better to leave this topic between them. Renya began to weigh the pros and cons because it wasn't such a bad proposition. After all, no matter how cool he was, traveling alone, 2 heads were better than 1. Rona also winked at the guy and said that the most important thing for him was that he could get the right to fall in love with her. Renya's face changed. He refused and then told Ro to get out. Rona turned away, visibly upset. The girl said that it was quite cruel, and if Renya continued to talk like that, she would leave here and run around the hotel screaming his name in such an outfit. Renya realized that he seemed to have gone a little overboard. The boy agreed, then said that he was giving up. Renya slowly added that he didn't know if he could live up to their expectations. The guy was starting to get to the point where he was ready to try joining Sion and Rona's group. Ro broke into a bright smile, saying words of gratitude to Renya. Then the guy shouted for the girl to go back to her room. The next day began with emotions, and requests that Renya was no longer going to hold back. After Rona left, he thought it over well, and then they all went down to breakfast, where Renya began to voice it. The guy put his hands together and nervously started talking at the common table about how he needed money, a lot of money. And the guy wouldn't mind a regular salary. Sion was surprised that this was the first time she heard Renya say this. The young man continued to insist, saying that the first thing to do was to create a suitable basis for action. He clenched his fist, continuing to look at the girls who didn't understand anything. After which he added that he put up with this hovel where they were now. But there weren't even conditions for basic consumers here. Renya exhaled heavily, then slammed the table. The young man added that the food here was also terrible, and the beds were terribly uncomfortable. On top of that, there wasn't even a smell of a bathroom nearby. Sion covered her mouth with her hand and said that Renya seemed to be in a bad mood. She still didn't understand what he was talking about. Ro laughed excitedly, saying that the boy didn't seem to like this place. Renya also added that one shouldn't look down on the Japanese, after which he slowly turned his gaze to Shion's eyes and said that if one were to rent a normal place to live, one would need at least 1 platinum coin. Sion, hearing this, was even more confused. They knew that they definitely didn't have that kind of money now. 1 platinum coin was equal to 100 gold coins. Sion turned and asked Ro about the price of the house, but the young man still had something to say. Renya folded his arms across his chest and said that he had thought about it, and that he had probably been too naive to think that he could handle everything on his own. He also went on to say that since he was not from this world, he did not know much, and he had absolutely no acquaintances here. Also, at this stage, finding allies would be quite difficult. Sion made a surprised face, gradually began to understand what Renya was talking about. The guy announced that he had come to the conclusion that it would be much easier for him to work together with those he already knew. Sion gasped, then impatiently wanted to ask herself if she understood everything correctly. Ro calmly drank coffee, realizing that the guy did not deceive her yesterday. Interrupting Sion, Renya decided that since he had started, he should finish his speech himself. The boy looked confidently at the newbie swordsman and said that in other words, he wanted to convey that he was now with their group. This turn of events was not exactly unexpected for Sion. Rather, she had placed a lot of hope on this answer. Having spent half the night in her thoughts, she began to tremble, trying to say words of gratitude to Rainier, after which she could not stand it and jumped up, grabbing the young man's hand. Sion joyfully shouted that she was very grateful for this decision. Renya was slightly taken aback by such sincere joy. He asked if the girl had understood him correctly, since it was only until he found a place to live. Sion continued to smile, saying that he was right. Afterwards, the girl herself said that they needed to start a base. Sion said that to be honest, she was also tired of living in hotels, so their goals coincided. Rona's behavior changed after that night, and Renya perceived her differently. Ro remarked to Sion that this was quite fortunate. Sion agreed, saying that she didn't even know what she would do. While the girl continued to rejoice, Renya called out to her, asking if she had even listened to him. Suddenly, Sion said that the boys were home now, for which she thanked God. Ro sharply shouted out the girl's name. There was an awkward pause, after which Ro grabbed her head, placing it in her hands. Sion began to wave her hand nervously, trying to explain the meaning of the words she had said earlier. Rena repeated the girl's words about some guys who were at home. He smiled and said that, apparently, the girls had other companions. Shinon started to laugh nervously, saying that of course not. It was ridiculous. But she stood her ground, saying that Renya must have misheard. Ro thought that Sion was making her feel awkward now. So, with a little bit of mistrust, Renya went to find his place in this second life he never wanted for himself. In the end, Sion brought up the subject of magic again. They came to the mage Sion had spoken of earlier. The woman handed Renya a small crystal ball that fit easily in his hand, and then told him to try to imagine a bright light. This was the only way to find out what type of magic a character had. Soon they all saw a glow, to which Sion and Ro reacted rather ambiguously. Renya continued to stare at the crystal ball, which now had a small green light burning inside it. Sion leaned closer, saying that his magic type was wind. The only sorceress of Kurukiri, self-proclaimed of course, was Carol Villiers. The woman folded her hands and said that based on the results, Renya's magic type was indeed wind, and it was very strong. Afterwards, Carol added that there was one detail. Unfortunately, the guy had very little mana, half of what the norm usually is. Renya continued to look at her in amazement, asking what else she could tell him. The sorceress added that the color of the glow that the crystal ball showed was in perfect order. It was not often that she got to see such a beautiful glow of pure magic here. Carol held her hand out, indicating that she wanted the orb back. She said that technically, the boy's glow power was not enough for the potential he had. After Carol concentrated a little, the room was immediately illuminated by a bright light. She said that in the case of an ordinary person, the ball would shine dimly. But if there is a talent for magic, the light will blind, as it is now. The brightness of the light was indeed borderline annoying. Carol added that there were also records of some crystal balls exploding when touched by heroes. Sion smiled shyly, sadly lowering her eyes down. The girl said rather quietly, but after she took the ball, it was clear that the object was barely shining. Carol tried to calm the girl down, saying that if she used magic, her mana would gradually increase, and how much this would happen depended only on training. With such a low starting level, one really couldn't expect much. Rena suddenly asked what one had to do to properly conduct these trainings. After the question he asked, the sorceress's hand immediately stretched forward and began to make a clear gesture. Carol told the guy to prepare 7 silver coins if he wanted information. Then she held out both her hands with the leaf, asking Renya to hold out his in return. She grabbed his wrist, then said that she would give the boy light. The room was once again illuminated by a bright light, after which a seal appeared on the sheet of paper in the young man's hand. The sheet of paper began to burn right there, and Renya received a notice that it was written that he had been granted a non-elemental skill. Rainier was also given a choice on the panel, so he could either accept the gift or refuse it. The boy pressed accept, which surprised Carol and Sion. Seeing the boy move his fingers through the air, Carol sat down in her chair, then said that the spell is activated by asking. Renya must turn to the spell of light, and then ask to grant him the power of the spell. Renya's hand itched a little, but the boy continued to listen attentively without being distracted. The sorceress said that after Renya called on the light, a small bright clot should appear. Carol also added that to effectively train and improve your magic, you can simply continue to cast this skill, and the skill will begin to grow on its own. Renya suddenly remembered that same green glow in the ball, after which he immediately asked what about his predisposition to wind magic, because it would be better for him to get spells of this element. Carol only firmly said that Renya was not ready for this. The sorceress assured that she could teach him wind magic, but it was unlikely that he would be able to use it. It should also be said that if the guy manages to increase his mana level through training, he can come to her again and she will grant him some wind magic. Not for free, of course. All these magical demonstrations and training seemed to give Sion some kind of energy. The girl quickly left the sorceress, continuing to hum something. She moved a little bit like a dance. Renya couldn't help but notice it and, of course, asked Sion the reason for her suspiciously happy mood. The girl laughed, saying that it was simple. Sion now realized that there were things that even Renya, who seemed perfect to her, ended up being bad at. Renya looked at her in surprise. Sion continued to say that she meant that she was also bad at magic like him, so they were similar in some ways. Renya waved his hand, hitting her forehead, and then told her not to compare herself to him. Renya exhaled heavily, after which he said that in any case, he wanted to ask Sion to wait a little, about a couple of days, before accepting him into her group. The girl didn't quite understand him, after which Renya turned around and said that he didn't know much about magic, but he also didn't know much about his abilities in general. Sion continued to rub her forehead where Renya had placed his palm. The girl did not understand what Renya was trying to tell her now. It was hard for her to imagine how a person could not know such things about themselves. Renya scratched his head, saying that, to be honest, when he came here to Eldora, he immediately lost most of his memories, so he wasn't confident in himself yet. Sion turned around in surprise and asked if Renya had amnesia. It was also hard to believe since he didn't seem confused when they met him. The girl put her finger to her head. All the memories, after which she added that it turns out that the guy is one of those who are called missing persons. In the end, Renya decided that it would be better to keep quiet altogether. Shinon suddenly broke the silence that had fallen while Renya was thinking. She said that people without memories were very mysterious. Renya thought that Cheyenne wasn't a very smart person and that sometimes played into his hands. The guy said that he wanted to test what his body and he himself were capable of. To do this, they needed to find a place where Renya could train quietly and peacefully. Since he was still not very good at orienting himself, he wanted to entrust the search to Shinon. Shinon said that she understood Renya's request perfectly. They went outside the city walls, where there was a small lawn, free from prying eyes. Renya stretched, saying that he would start with a test of endurance. In fact, Sion said that the area north of the city would suit him perfectly. The monsters there are weak and the soil is barren. For that reason, even if Renya destroys everything there, no one will mind. Renya rushed forward, gradually accelerating and adding jumps as he ran. He looked at himself, realizing that his body seemed very light. The guy looked ahead and thought that a young body was great. Renya soon reached the wasteland. The boy looked around, realizing that it seemed like he could train here in peace. Sion had mentioned earlier that it would take a couple of hours to get here, but Renya got there in about half an hour. This place already looked like it had been destroyed. Renya looked at his hands and realized that he wasn't even out of breath. Well, it seemed like he could be confident in his strength now. So, it was time to move on to the next stage. The guy quickly pulled out his blade and swung it in front of himself, simulating a chopping blow at an imaginary enemy. At first glance, Renya could wield his sword quite well. Did his body really remember anything from his past life? The attacks came as easily as a shine. After testing his strength and weapon a bit, Renya picked up the sword and looked at it with disdain. Renya thought that this sword was so-so, really, but he had nowhere to go now. Renya continues to swing the blade, refining his striking technique. He also thought that with such a sword, he should not let down his guard, but it will do for swinging back and forth. The young man decided that when he settled down a bit, he would make his own sword. After all, he needed to use the blacksmithing skill that he had received from the goddess. So, the close combat practice could be finished. Now it would be possible to begin magic. Renya recalled Carol's words, who advised him to simply cast light, to increase the effectiveness of training, and increase the level of magic. Renya stood up and extended his hand. The young man did all this slowly, because firstly, he still considered it strange and unusual for himself, and secondly, he was afraid of doing something wrong. The guy remembered that he needed to cast that very spell. Renya, still standing with his hand outstretched, said for the spell of light to grant him its power. Suddenly, Renya began to feel unwell and did not even notice how his eyes closed. He kept thinking that he had done everything right. Afterwards, he began to remember that the spell was light, but then why was it so dark? Suddenly, he heard a female voice asking if he was okay. Renya quickly opened his eyes. The first thing Renya saw was the white underwear that belonged to the voice above. The girl continued to stand above him, slightly shielding the young man from the scorching sun and asking how he felt. Renya continued to blink slowly, not understanding what had happened to him. When he realized that there was someone above him, it suddenly brought the guy to his senses. Renya jumped up very abruptly, grabbing his blade. He moved away from the girl a little, crouching on his feet. The girl did not expect such a turn of events at all, so such abruptness knocked her off her feet. Renya looked at the girl, asking her who she was. She shook herself off and said she was a traveling merchant. The girl was passing by when she saw Renya fall. Afterwards, she smiled and said that she could already see Renya had come to his senses. Renya continued to hold the blade, asking again if he had really fallen to the ground. The merchant girl looked warily at the young man who held the blade in his hand, and answered him that it was so. Of course, it did not lie there for long, but she managed to come up to him. Renya got angry, thinking that it was because of magic. He certainly had no talent, but to faint like that. Now there was another moment. More important. The main question. Where did this girl come from? Renya knew that he should be more wary of his surroundings now, because it could all be related to Sion. The girl spread her arms freely, saying that even if the guy had not defended himself, she would not have done anything anyway. She also added that trading is part of a merchant's job. Renya asked again if the girl was really a merchant. He had not seen a single bag of goods, which a seller of various goods should have with him. The girl just grinned contentedly, then said that Renya must have heard great things about her. She is a great merchant who crosses continents and owns one of the rarest empty vaults. The girl said her name was Kakiri. Then she put her hands on her hips and said that this must be very surprising news for Renya. The boy replied that he had never heard of her. Renya interrupted, asking the girl to listen. Kakiri simply continued to say that she deals with a wide range of items, from military equipment to jewelry, while Jakiri was advertising a certain knife made from the fang of an emerald dragon. Renya continued to lose patience with the fact that no one was listening to him. He was ready to put this girl anywhere, but bottomless storage was indeed a great skill for a merchant. The girl opened the shop before Renya could notice. She was already sitting on the ground and advertising the goods loudly. Renya suddenly noticed that the girl was showing many of her weak points. It seemed like there was a possibility that she was dangerous, and it didn't seem like she was lying about her occupation. The girl also told Renya, if anything happened, not to be shy about taking the goods into his own hands to make sure they were useful. Unexpectedly for himself, Renya actually noticed something. Renya leaned over to the goods and immediately picked up a Japanese sword. When he took it out, the boy realized that it was quite long and that it must be an uchigatana. Uchigatana was a type of katana. It was used by samurai during the feudal era. After examining the blade itself, Renya realized that it was a very sharp sword. Renya also recalled that according to the story of that little girl, there could not be any Japanese swords in this world. The girl noticed the boy's interest, and then said that she knew about the Japanese sword. Gikiri extended her hand, saying that this weapon, in her memory, was left behind by a lost person long ago. This blade was very valuable, like a work of art. Since there were no people who could use it, it looked like an ordinary trinket. The girl wanted someone to appreciate it and buy it for a reasonable price. Renya put the uchigatana back into its sheath and then put it back. The girl thought that the boy didn't like the sword. She said that she would lower the price if he bought it right away. Renya said that the sword was simply amazing. He considered it a miracle. He was also sure that there was no one in this world more suitable to use it than him. But he had no money right now. Gikiri was very surprised when she heard Renya's words. She was surprised, said that his words meant that the guy was a lost person. She also added that everything that cannot be obtained here has great value. Renya opened his storage, poking his finger a bit, and then began to take out shinai from there. Renya said that even if she said so, that was all he had with him. Gikiri's eyes immediately lit up when she saw shinai. The girl spread her arms out, loudly asking if it was an artifact by any chance. At first, Renya just looked at her reaction in surprise. The girl held out her hands, asking him to lend her shinai for a while. Renya was surprised, asking if she knew what it was. Gikiri looked at the item with a wide smile, saying that she had nothing to show for it as a trader lately. She was willing to exchange shinai for a Japanese sword. Renya got his hands on his Japanese sword, after which he could not speak coherently for a long time. After a couple of minutes, he asked if Gikiri were sure, because in his opinion, this was not a very equal exchange. The merchant said that everything was fine. Since Renya had given her the artifact, it was in much greater demand from collectors who were willing to buy it. If it was valued as a commodity, it would certainly be much easier to sell. Renya made a face a little, saying that he didn't think so. Gikiri said that then she would be in for shame. The girl also said that while they were in the middle of the exchange, could Renya show how she wielded a sword? She thought that after this, the probability of selling it should increase. Gikiri said that she would still make a deal with Renya. The guy thought, saying that if that's the case, then it's okay. The girl moved a little to the side and leaned against a small wooden pole. Gikiri exclaimed that this was his target now. Renya only smiled, seeing the merchant waiting intently. The guy exhaled, then said that since she was waiting for a demonstration, then she would. If Gikiri really wanted it, like someone would do it, that it would be normal. After a little preparation, Renya, who was standing in front of the pillar, first came out and then very quickly pulled up his katana from its sheath. He managed to deliver several blows in an instant. The log they had prepared for testing split into 3 neatly cut pieces in an instant. Gikiri was silent, her eyes wide open. This was the first time she had seen her product in use. Renya had already put the katana back at that moment. He thought that Japanese swords were really amazing. A quiet "wow" was heard from the side. Gikiri said that she didn't see the blow at all. Renya looked at it again, saying that it was a really good sword. The boy also added that he felt like he was already familiar with it, in a way. Gikiri smiled, seeing that Renya, apparently, had come to the final conclusion of their deal. The girl smiled and said that then they decided, and she was ready to exchange the sword for a shinai. Renya was happy. As she left, the merchant sang that everything was right. Everything was as in the prophecy. Renya asked in surprise what prophecy she was talking about. The girl said that the guy collapsed due to a lack of magical power. She suggested that he start practicing in safe places, like his room, for example. Afterwards, the girl said that it was just an angel, or rather, a merchant's intuition. Afterwards, the girl said rather quietly that this could cause him to collapse. But since it was him, Renya would definitely become an amazing magic user in the near future. Continuing to walk further away, Kiri waved her hand, saying that they would see each other later. Renya began to suspect something, saying that this did not seem like a merchant's intuition. Or rather, the guy wanted to say that according to the girl, he collapsed when he used magic. She was kind of strange after all. She spent so much effort for this. Should he consider himself happy now? When Kiri was out of sight, she went behind some large rocks where she could not be seen. The girl raised her left hand and said that Gila was beginning to report. The girl said that her mission was completed. All this time she was turning to the Lord, adding that she was able to take Sinai Kunugi Renya without any problems. The goddess sat in a chair, opposite her panel. The girl said that Gyero had done a good job. The angel immediately corrected her, saying that she was Gilel, because the goddess herself had called her that. Gilel began to scream, saying that it was entirely her mistress's fault that she had to change her name and do something so unpleasant. The angel accused her of thoughtlessly giving out attributes, like Shinai-sa. After all, the goddess made Shinai indestructible. It was stronger than diamond, so if someone wanted to break it, they would die. If Renya was careless, he could destroy anything. This is what could happen with the weapon of mass destruction given to him for practice. Gilel also said that while they were doing this, the goddess was planning to divide the balance of this world. The goddess began to scream back, asking for it all to stop. She asked indignantly how she could keep track of so many small details all this time. The goddess got really angry, then said that one way or another, Gilel had to make sure she gave the boy a replacement. Gilel confirmed this. The girl said that she secretly took this Japanese sword from Renya's grave after the proposal. Since she was carrying out the divine will, it did not matter much. The goddess smiled and said that it was indeed so. Then the girl said that she was simply sure that this Japanese sword should be very easy to use. The goddess again misspelled her assistant's name after congratulating her on a job well done. The angel got angry again, saying she would bury her. After his return, Renya was standing in the kitchen preparing the morning drink for the group. Sion suddenly burst into the room, saying that they finally received a request from the guild. The girl ran closer to the boy, calling his name. Renya simply said that he could hear her. Then he added that Renya would skip all the details and Sion could call Rona for him. Renya finally finished, and then joined the common table with his mug. Rona was already there and ready to listen. Sion, after everyone was gathered, said that the place was south of here. Some crew got into trouble, and it seems that a new living dungeon has been discovered. The request was to conquer. Renya stopped her a bit, asking about the living dungeon. Sion perked up a bit, then said that a living dungeon was a type of underground where abandoned mines, caves, or abandoned buildings were filled with demons and monsters. A dungeon that can completely remake everything around what is called the dungeon core. The core is full of monsters and treasures, and adventurers who enter it often die, and the core absorbs mana. Afterwards, Sion said that even if he left the dungeon alone, it would still absorb mana from its surroundings. It always grows at the expense of everything else. And since the dungeon is teeming with various monsters, which are of a fairly strong level, it was they who were asked to reduce their number. Renya was a little surprised, considering his strength and the danger. The boy asked if the guild really had issued a request for just the 3 of them. Sion shook her head, saying that it wasn't so. The girl smiled, then put her finger forward and solemnly said that this time they would go there with 4 other adventurers. The plan was this. The guild prepared a horse and carriage for their transportation. However, they had a time limit, which was 2 days for the round trip and 2 days for searching the dungeon. Each side will receive 6 gold coins in total, plus expenses. Also, for destroying the core, you can get an additional 10 gold coins. Ro and Renya exchanged glances. Rona smiled sheepishly, saying that she didn't see anything strange about it. It all sounded as if the request was genuine, and, for all that, worth considering. Sion became more confident, and then asked if all the preparations were complete. She added that they would leave tomorrow morning. Although before that, at sunset, they would have to meet up with the rest of the group. Renya and Rona exclaimed in surprise. They were clearly not happy that they had to be ready to move out by sunset today. Renya even spilled his coffee. Rona began to feel ashamed for her charge again. Renya calmly began to tell Sion that next time, before taking a request, she should consult with the others. Sion continued to try to justify herself very confusedly, inserting sounds of surprise between the guy's words. Renya did not calm down, saying that they also had their own circumstances. Then he added that even if she was their leader, such things were still discussed before anything was decided. After that, everyone started looking at each other in surprise. Sion said that she thought Renya was the leader of their group. Ro agreed. Afterwards, the guy grabbed his head, saying that he was a lost man. Did they really think that someone like him was fit to lead a world unknown to him? Ro looked at the boy and said that if Renya became their leader, it would be a great help to her. She began to beg the boy. Renya indignantly said that such a thing was being said by a girl. Looking at Ro, the boy immediately understood what she was thinking. With Sion as the leader, Ro saw a future full of problems, so she wanted someone else to be the leader. Renya knew that otherwise the girl would say that he had snuck into her room at night and blackmailed her. He closed his eyes and continued to look at Ro, saying that he understood everything. Renya put his hands together and said that if he was their leader, that only made him accept an already terrible job. The guy added that before leaving, they should gather food and equipment for 3 people. However, they needed time for this. Sion lowered her head guiltily, saying that Renya was indeed right, and the girl herself exaggerated a little. Sion tried to hold back the tears that were starting to form in her eyes. The girl apologized and said that when she tried to be careful, Ro did everything for her. Renya added that she should be grateful to him for this. Afterwards, the guy said that, in any case, they had little time left to prepare for this work. Yes, we need to hurry. The guy turned to Rona, telling her to go to the store and get everything ready, because she was already used to the city. Afterwards, Renya turned to Sion and said that the 2 of them would go to the meeting together. The boy asked if she had information about the other participants. Sion confirmed this, saying that it was okay to leave the task to her. Sion knew she could really be useful in this matter. She threw up her hands and said that she knew almost all the active groups in the city because Renya could just ask. Sion said that this time they would definitely be the best. Afterwards, they headed to the inn that was located near the guild Silver Cup. As they got closer, Renya noticed the signboard that was the same color scheme and style as the guild's. Sion said that this tractor was driven by the Adventurers Guild itself. When the guys went inside, most of those sitting at the tables inside immediately turned around and glanced at the unknown newcomers. They had not been seen in the tavern before. Renya didn't retreat with his gaze, continuing to look at the people around him. Afterwards, he secretly told Sion that apparently everyone was already in their places. A man in armor stood up from his seat and said that everyone here had already heard from the guild that they had gathered. Everyone here who was going to capture the dungeon. Renya asked why the guy suddenly stood up and started talking. The girl explained that this guy was the leader of the group Bearer of the Burning Lotus. His name was Heart's Raisin, and he was a B-rank adventurer who wielded 2 swords at the same time. Most likely, this adventurer was of the highest rank. Renya asked about the rank, assuming it was some sort of guild classification. Sion said it was more or less like that. The girl said that everyone was ranked from S to F rank, and since they were new, they were currently at the very bottom. Also the guy who was sitting at the other table and hugging his girlfriend. He is the leader of the group Sharp Fang, and his name is Zest Fatality. He had an unsightly appearance. Because of his terrible behavior, the guy is now only at C rank. He wields a long rapier. Since the guy was as strong as if you were B rank, that's why he ranks like this. Renya thought about Sion's emphasis on the behavior of the last leader. It was noticeable because Zest was very brazen towards his girlfriend in a public place. Sion continued, saying that those guys were coming next, pointing to the far corner. They were the members of the group Explorers, and it was quite unusual that their leader was a mage. He had red hair, was wearing a robe, Oz Honda, rank D. Renya didn't even understand how he should react to her knowing so much. Sion replied that she said that if he wanted to know about someone, he could always ask her. Renya said that everything was clear to him, but he himself thought that she was the same as people who persecute their idols. Cess was outraged, shouting at Rainier and Sion. He asked what the two of them were talking about, glancing sideways at all the groups. Sion was a little scared, staring at the leader. Zest Fatality looked at the newcomers with disdain, saying that there were only two of them. The guy didn't even know how they were going to survive in the dungeon they were all going to. Renya calmly replied that they still had a fellow priest. She was absent due to final preparations. Sion confirmed, but Zest only said that it was as if they were laughing at him. Afterwards, Zest said that he wasn't talking to him at all. Hearts chimed in, calming Zest down. The Lotus leader said that with this attitude, they would only get into trouble. Afterwards, Hearts apologized for the fact that they might have greeted the boys rudely. Afterwards, the swordsman explained that they wanted to do their job properly, so it would be better if the newcomers just left this concern to them. Zest chuckled, saying that these two had some kind of wonderful world in their heads. At this time, Hearts pointed at the guys, saying that they were the last ones to arrive and they should introduce themselves. Renya remained calm, saying that their group didn't have a name yet. They had formed it recently, and he himself had also recently joined the guild. The boy gave his name. When the guild veterans heard this, the inn burst into laughter. Hearts said that their group was F rank. Renya said that he had understood correctly. Zest spread his arms wide, shouting throughout the tavern. He said that the boys were just a bunch of scumbags, 3 F-ranked fools. He also called them leeches, saying that he would finish them off himself before anything could happen. Sion didn't remain silent, and then slammed her hands on the table. The girl said that the request didn't say anything about rank. There was no limit on the number of people either. The girl said that she was Sion, then added that she was the same F rank as the guy with her. Zest started laughing loudly after hearing the same. Zest continued to laugh loudly, then suddenly grabbed one of the bottles that was on the table. He launched the glass projectile straight at Sion. Sion managed to notice that an object was flying at her, but the only thing she could provide as an answer was to simply cover herself with her hands. Renya was quicker and reached for the flying bottle. Renya protected his group member, not just by deflecting the bottle, but by catching it. Zest certainly didn't expect that and stared at the F-ranked boy in surprise. Zest let out a drawn-out expression of surprise after Renya placed the bottle on the table in front of him. Zest then muttered through his teeth that the boy seemed to want to put on a show. While Sion smiled happily, having caught spiritual relief, Renya continued to be completely focused on the group of Sharp Fang. The boy felt as if he was being invited to continue. The other adventurers who were sitting next to their leader already prepared themselves in case of a commotion. Zest said that no matter how hard the trash tries, it will remain trash. So enough of this nonsense. One of the group members, who had prepared several throwing knives under the table in advance, stood up abruptly and threw several at Sion and Renya. The tension in the guild began to rise. The leaders of the other teams watched the events with surprise and judgment. Sion was consumed by even greater fear. Renya and Sion had already sat down at this time, so the boy's mobility was slightly blocked. 4 sharp blades flew straight at him alone. Renya turned towards the threat, then put his hands forward, and as soon as the blades approached him, he spread his fingers a little, then caught all the knives. Zest and the girl who attacked the guy screamed loudly in surprise. Renya exhaled, then carefully swung the knives in his hands. Zest Fatality only managed to insult the guy who publicly humiliated his team and personal dignity. Renya threw the knives back, and they stuck into the table where they were sitting. The girl Zesta was a little scared when she saw the look Renya was looking at them with now. Afterwards, Renya said that he heard that a regular meeting would take place here. Afterwards, the guy began to gradually change his intonation to a more menacing one, saying that this did not quite resemble the description he had given earlier. Renya also noticed this. Zest said that he was the one wondering who was to blame. The other leaders calmed down a bit, realizing that no one inside would likely be harmed. They meekly turned away, deciding to let the situation take its course. Renya started to rise from his chair, saying that he understood everything. The guy also added that, since they were saying that they were the ones to blame, it was time for them to leave this meeting. Shun began to call out to the youth in confusion, but Renya firmly said that the adventurers should not expect them to work with them on this request. He also added that they would not be excused if they failed. As he was leaving, Renya addressed everyone, saying that they would work in their own way so the others should do what they wanted to. Renya thought this was the best solution, and he asked the others about it as well. The leaders of the other group supported this decision. Hart said that they could not work in such a mess, and as the leader of the explorers, added that he did not want to be near the Fang group. In the end, all the groups decided that they would work separately. Zest was very angry. Renya said that in that case, everything was decided and they were done here for today. Walking out the door, Ornia. Suddenly, he heard Zest calling him. The leader of the Fangs with a wide grin told the guy to watch his back better when he was in the dungeon. Renya didn't turn around, but he didn't ignore the words either. Renya just quietly told Zest to also spy on his. The entire group of Fangs started laughing like hyenas. Renya went outside, and Sion immediately followed him. The door to the inn slammed shut as the newcomers left. Renya continued to walk forward confidently. Sion was very confused. The girl came closer to Renya and then began to apologize, saying that it was her request. The young man said that there was no need to continue discussing it. The young man turned and added that they had already had a conversation about the request. Renya also explained that the failure of the meeting was primarily his fault, so he should just leave it. Renya turned around and said that he asked her to leave it. If the girl said another word, he promised that he would smash her head. Sion was scared and immediately asked again what Renya would smash. In fact, Sion didn't need a second answer. She already understood everything. She was just very confused. Renya also realized that he had gone too far when he spoke to the girl like that. Renya turned to Sion and said that in any case, this was his very first job as an adventurer. The youth then asked if he could rely on Sion at this moment. Sion first stared at the young man in surprise, then realized for herself that Renya was probably very nervous, and a situation in the tavern had thrown him off track. But despite all this, the guy continues to place hopes on her, trusting himself to her. Sion stood for a while, then replied that Renya can rely on her, and began to catch up with the guy. The carriages carrying the adventurers set off early in the morning as planned. Sion was leading the carriage, holding the reins, while only Rona and Renya were inside. Rona was very displeased. She continued to look sullenly at Renya almost from the very beginning of the trip. Suddenly she dropped the silence, asking if Renya did it on purpose. Renya, with the same sleep-deprived and gloomy face, asked a question in response, talking about what Rona was talking about now. The girl said that now she was talking about relations with other groups. Rose said that she could, of course, feel that he was all getting along badly with them. She meant that when it came to things like that, couldn't Renya not do that? Then added that no, that would be impossible. Renya smiled nervously, saying that there was a terrible atmosphere there from the beginning. The guy back then only did what he thought was best, considering their rank, compared to the others. Ro asked what Renya meant by the word bashed. The boy turned away, saying that this way they avoided unnecessary conflicts, and it would be better if they let them take care of everything themselves. Sion slept very little, because she was worried all night about the upcoming journey she had arranged. The conversation between Ro and Renya continued inside the carriage. As Sion was about to close her eyes, yawning softly, Renya listed the reasons. He said that with this setup, they could simply complete the mission these days without any effort and collect the reward. Rona was outraged that from the very beginning this was some kind of strategy that Renya was guided by. The guy in response continued to show 4 fingers, as a symbol that now they simplify their journey by 4 steps. Ro covered her face with her hand, saying that it would be easier to take up farming. Renya looked at her seriously and told her to call it an effective strategy for preserving life. At the end, Ro agreed, saying that it was probably the best solution for them, considering that they were barely prepared for such a sortie. She realized that they could protect Sion this way without any problem. Rona added that she thought everything would be fine. It seemed like they only had one strategy, so they had to stick to it. Sion thought that the two inside were having a lot of fun. Finally, she decided to turn to the boys inside. Sion turned to Ro and Renaer, saying that she had been leading the horse all this time. She felt that they should take turns somehow. Renya and Rona smiled flatly, telling the girl that this was her punishment for accepting a mission she had not discussed with her group first. Rona added that Sion had not yet been forgiven. Soon they stopped, deciding that they were almost at the entrance to the dungeon. The road was very long, so they should take a good rest before going down there. The girl said they would set up camp right there. While Ro and Sion were getting out the tent, Renya stopped and asked if it was okay for them to set up camp so close. Rona continued to set up stakes, and then replied that everything was fine. She quickly explained that in dungeons older than 10 years, there are no monsters that come to the surface. Rona pointed to the place of descent, saying that otherwise they could see the monsters from here, and it was much safer than setting up camp in the forest. Renya looked at the entrance in surprise, saying that there was even a staircase. Rona said that in this way she believed the dungeon was making an invitation to living beings. Renya asked a little shyly if the girl really had only one tent. Rona answered yes, since she had to stand guard, so there would be enough space. Sion realized that Renya had a slightly different reason for asking. She giggled and then winked at the boy, cheerfully saying that they were comrades after all. She then asked if it would bother him to sleep next to Ro and her. Renya had already started to say that there were some reasons for this, after which he immediately left himself, protecting him and Ro from unnecessary questions. Renya answered sharply that everything was fine. Afterwards, they began to prepare their camp together, hauling firewood, laying out portable furniture, and preparing food for the evening. Ro silently looked at Renya and thanked him for not telling Sion. Shinon and Ro, being hungry and tired, approached the table and stared at it with glowing eyes, not expecting such a comfortable environment. Everything looked very tasty, and it seemed like Renya knew what he was doing. On the table was a vegetable and rabbit stew, a small salad with fish, stale bread, some fruit, and wine. The guys said that if they had more time to prepare, he would have made something better. Renya also added that he was going to prepare better for the next mission. Xian began to slurp deliberately, saying that there was no need to be so hard on herself, because it was all very delicious. Rona looked towards where the other group's tents were. They were also having dinner, and the girl said that they had quite a lot of food compared to the other adventurers. The rest even sat on the ground and ate dried meat and stale bread. Maybe this is normal for this kind of travelers, because it was all thanks to Renyi's vault of emptiness. The rest looked with a bit of envy at the camp that the F-rank rookie adventurers had set up for themselves. It all seemed really suspicious to them. Rue also tasted the food and began to be touched. The girl said that she was really happy that Renya had become their comrade. The guy said that the two of them really had no worries in such company. Renya himself thought that he didn't even have the right to refuse. Renya glanced sideways cautiously and told them to be extremely careful with the redheads group. Rona turned her head back, realizing that Renya was talking about Zest and his women. Renya watched them sit and drink by the fire, then added that Zest doesn't show it. But because of what happened at the meeting, maybe he's planning something. Renya isn't so worried about herself, because she can stand up for herself. But because of what he just said, the girl should be on guard. Xian and Rona said they understood. Soon it was completely dark. Xian had already gone into the tent, and Renya waited a little while for her to lie down, then went in himself. Rona said that she would be the first to stand guard. Renya straightened out his sleeping bag and began to climb inside, thinking that as long as Rona was on guard, he wouldn't have to worry so much about something happening. Renya began to close his eyes gradually, thinking that he too needed to rest. They were all going to get up early tomorrow, and Renya was still going to prepare breakfast for the whole group. Renya had already closed his eyes, having lain like that for several minutes. Almost falling asleep, the boy felt something soft near him. Something was pressing on him, and at first he thought it was an enemy, but it didn't look like it. Shun climbed out of her sleeping bag and began to climb onto the other half, where Renya himself was now located. Gradually opening his eyes, Renya thought that it might be Rona, but it turned out to be Xion. Renya continued to lie in the zip sleeping bag, unable to get out carefully. He thought that although it was not Rona, Xion had the same habit. Suddenly Renya came to his senses, remembering Rona's words. The guy began to tell Xion to wake up. Xion, however, was sleeping very soundly, and only replied that she was not Rona. Renya was starting to get angry because he couldn't move at all inside the sleeping bag. Xion kept holding him close, making strange sounds. Renya knew very well that if Rona came inside and found them like this, he could get into trouble right away. Renya continued to whisper to Xion to wake up. Xion kept her eyes closed, but she was talking in her sleep. Xion suddenly called Renya by her friend Ro's name, and then said that she was very warm. Renya thought that Xion was sleeping so soundly that she didn't even hear him. Suddenly, the tent began to open and a female voice asked if someone was calling her. Of course it was Rona, who probably heard them from outside. Renya was about to start explaining everything, but Ro continued to slowly walk in, saying that Renya looked so comfortable. Renya spent a few more seconds shouting that this was not what Rona might have thought, but when he realized that Rona was continuing to walk towards him, he immediately remembered her first words inside the tent. Rona suddenly began to lie down on the other side of Renya. The young man asked her in surprise what Rona was doing. Rona answered that she was simply showing her love. The situation was getting very strange, and Renya couldn't get her head around it. Rona added that she just wanted to join them, and that she felt like she was starting to fall asleep. Renya began to twitch even more, already began to raise his voice. He asked what Rona was talking about. Who would then guard their tent from threats instead of her? Rona had already closed her eyes and was smiling, as if she was seeing some kind of beautiful dream. Renya understood that under their weight he couldn't even move. He didn't even understand where these girls got so much strength from. Renya raised his head and told the girls to stop fooling around and start getting up. Suddenly Renya noticed that he was seeing some strange fog. The young man's eyes began to close forcibly, and the last thing the boy thought was that someone was attacking them. But Renya couldn't figure out who was behind this attack. In any case, it was very bad for them. Soon, several people started approaching their tent. Renya heard a voice outside asking if they should do it right now. Renya's eyes snapped open, still listening to the conversation outside the tent. Another voice, this time a man's, said that right now would be the perfect time to take care of these little scum. One of the girls who held the wand said that she did not think it would be possible. It all depends on the magician, because the hypnosis spell can be destroyed by pain and external noise. They will have a lot of problems. Zest hugged the girl he was sitting with in the tavern and said that she seemed jealous. Zest was a little drunk. The mage started to answer something, but Zest immediately said that it wasn't necessary to be like that. The red-haired leader of the group laughed, saying that they could overtake this F group and then set a trap. Then it would be even funnier. At the same time, it would seem normal and plausible. A bunch of adventurers die in the dungeons, so they won't even be suspected. Renya let out a breath, thinking that they were finally gone. It was a good thing that that murderous aura had managed to wake him up, because he was almost able to find his knife in his sleeping bag. Renya recalled Shiwan's words, noting that Zest seemed to use a rapier in battle. The youth knew that he would be able to defend himself, but the girls might have problems. All of a sudden, Renya saw Xian, who was lying on top of the sleeping bag in her sleeping clothes, start to open her eyes. She immediately turned red, not understanding what was happening. When morning finally arrived, the three leaders gathered to discuss their plan of action. Hearts immediately said that it seemed that the Sharp Fang group had beaten them in speed and had already descended into the dungeon. Even their camp that they set up yesterday was gone because they had dismantled it. Hearts was clearly not happy about this, because being the strongest adventurer of the four groups, he probably wanted to take all the credit. Hearts placed his hands on his waist and said that, to be honest, their group's goal was to destroy the dungeon core by themselves. The leader of Lotus turned his gaze and asked if Xian was okay. He also added that if they destroyed the core with just their group, the reward would be on a completely different level. Plus, this dungeon is relatively new, so it wouldn't take long to explore. Afterwards, the man turned to Renya and said that the boy was surprisingly calm. Then Hearts asked if the boy would be upset if he lost 10 gold coins. Renya said that he would not be upset. Renya also added that 10 coins was a very reasonable price. The guy didn't mind at all if it meant he didn't have to participate in clearing out this dungeon. He would only gladly accept a reward for simply relaxing here. Magaz said he would agree. The leader of the explorers added that he would even write a letter of thanks to this red-haired idiot. Hearts, listening to this, could not believe his ears. The guys continue to prepare that after the Sharp Fang, there will be only a couple of monsters left and they will only have to avoid making the same mistakes. Renya asked Hearts if everything was okay because he saw his face change. Hearts said that they should help the first group in the fight. Renya and Az almost unanimously said that they did not think so. Renya replied that he personally had no intention of cleaning up the mess left by those who had chosen to die of their own free will. The young man truly believed that they were not obliged to do so. Magaz thought for a moment and said that he saw the truth in the young man's words. He also added that even if they could only wound the enemy before dying, it would be a plus for them. Renya smiled when he heard he answer. He turned to the mage and said that he liked the way he was thinking. The leader of the explorers just winked silently at the young man. Hearts remained confused. He initially asked the two if they thought this was normal. Afterwards, without waiting for an answer, the leaders of the other two groups each went to their own camp. Renya was already standing with Rona, after which he said that if Hearts and the others were to be believed, by midday they should see some kind of sign informing them of how everything was going inside. He also added that their group had already decided to take the safe route. That was the reason why there was no need to get into trouble. Renya pointed toward Sion, who was still kneeling in shame, trying to comprehend what had happened that night. The young man asked Rona to take care of the girl and get her cleaned up. Renya added that it would be more important to take care of breakfast, which he would take on himself, but he would need the help of two girls. Soon they had everything set. But Sion continued to avoid Renya. Suddenly the boy looked into the field and saw that Hearts was gone too. He went towards Aza and then asked him what had happened to the group of Lotus old men. The leader of the explorers group, chewing his stale bread, said that if Renya was talking about Hearts, then he and his group went into the dungeon right after Zest. Renya just chuckled, looking at the passage, and then said that he still couldn't figure out whether he was honest or greedy. I added that thanks to Renya, his group could relax. The armored guys from the mages group said that it was for sure. Renya looked at them all, then said that they could sit and eat breakfast in peace without any fuss. He knew he could do a nice thing. Renya said they could all stay here and relax a bit. That was an opportunity. Then the guy said they could share the food. I looked at the guy in surprise, then said what he was saying. The magician asked if Renya really wanted to say that he had enough food for 5 more people. Renya smiled and said that he wouldn't go broke if he shared once. I said that would be great, but then asked how the guy had managed to bring so much food with him. Renya smiled and then said that they had a bottomless storage. That was the reason they could take as much food and water as they wanted. Afterwards, the guy repeated that they had plenty of supplies, so they could easily prepare food for everyone who joined, if they wanted it themselves, of course. Magician suddenly made a serious face, then told Renya to wait a little. Then he announced that he wanted to make a deal, in exchange for breakfast and lunch. Renya asked, a little surprised, if Az thought that the young man was trying to poison them in this way. The magician bowed and said that he did not suspect him of anything. The man then added that accepting something for free was not their style. Renya smiled, saying that Az was quite decent, after which he immediately agreed and asked what would happen in return. Az came closer to Renya and said that he could teach the boy the basic spell, Fire Bullet. Afterwards, the magician asked if such a condition would be acceptable on their part. Renya said that it was a great offer, but was it an equal exchange? Renya said that he would definitely be in the black, since one basic light spell cost him 7 silver. I consoled the guy, then said that it was a worthwhile price to pay for the opportunity to eat hot food in such a place. He also asked that everything be done well, because his guys had been through a lot. It was clear that Az, as a true leader, was trying to take care of his team, especially in their group, when they were constantly covering for him. Renya smiled and said that he understood everything. After everything was ready, the two groups sat down at the tables and began to eat. The condition was indeed fulfilled by Renya, so after Az taught him the spell, I straightened up and said that the spell should be pronounced as follows. In the name of my power I conjure, fly, fiery bullet. He looked into Renyu's eyes and asked if everything was clear. Renya opened his panel again, and then accepted the spell. Az said that now the boy would be able to use it, if he had enough magical energy, of course. Afterwards, Az asked how often Renya could use the light spell. Renya thought for a moment, saying that the first time he used it, he was knocked out. He hadn't even managed to extract any light before blacking out. Afterwards, he spent a couple of days in his room in a continuous cycle of spells and blackouts, purposefully studying light over and over again. It was through trial and error that he finally got the hang of it. Now Renya can create 16 beams of light per minute for an hour. Az looked at the young man in surprise. Renya continued to stand there thoughtfully, saying that it was about 960 times. That was about how many times he could now use the light spell that Carol had taught him. I exclaimed that the guy was supposedly a swordsman. Renya said that was the point. The girl who taught him the spell said that he had absolutely no talent. She also added that if he trains hard, he might even be able to get a little better at it. I said it was unbelievable. Then he added that if Renya wanted to show off, he could have chosen something more realistic. Renya immediately said that he wasn't lying. The guy said that you can increase the amount of your magical energy if you use it often, even despite the fact that he has no talent. Az suddenly interrupted him, asking him to listen. The magician said that if all this was really true, Renya understood that Az still did not believe him. Thinking that it really was true, the magician extended his hand, saying that he would begin his explanation with frequency. I said that if he used light, he would be exhausted after 100 times. In other words, the magician pointed at the guy with his hand. If his words are true, then his magical energy exceeds Az's energy by 10 times. But he specializes in magic, and the guy is just a swordsman. Az continued, saying that magical energy can actually be increased through training, but it still can't be achieved in one day. It doesn't increase 100-fold no matter how talented you are. Renya wavered a little, realizing where Az was going with this. The mage said that this was where the discrepancy arose regarding his multiple summoning. Az could do that too, of course, but he usually limited himself to just 2 bunches. Afterwards, the mage said that he would now ask his second question. Az began to ask if Renya could use high-level magic, like parallel spells. The mage asked to demonstrate it to him. Renya muttered something a little uncertainly, then said that he didn't know about parallel spells, but he tried using a silence spell. This only caused Az to laugh loudly. The magician laughed for a long time, almost bending over. Having caught his breath a little, he began to calm down. Renya continued to look at him, then asked what he had said that was funny. Az kept smiling, saying that it was such a bad joke that even he couldn't help but laugh. Afterwards, Az said that he could give the guy one piece of advice. He shouldn't blab about everything. Afterwards, Az bowed his head and said that people might just think that Renya was a chatterbox. Renya was outraged by such criticism, but later calmed down, realizing what the matter was. Renya now fully understood that it was all because of the abilities the goddess had given him in the beginning. If you think about it, she had given him truly first-class abilities. Afterwards, Az said that if the guy could really summon 2-3 beams of light at a time, then he shouldn't have any problems with the fire bullet. Renya will produce does not become normal or large in size. Then it is better to think about a more effective way of using it. Renya thanked Az-sensei for his advice, and after thinking for a bit, he decided to ask the magician something. The magician looked at him, becoming slightly indignant. Meeble asked not to assign him any strange titles like sensei. The leader of the explorers simply asked him to call him Az. Renya said that he understood everything. Afterwards, the guy looked toward the entrance to the dungeon and asked Azu if it seemed to him that the first group that went down there had been in the dungeon for too long. They looked at the entrance together again, and Renya added that according to the adventurers who had come down, this dungeon was new, so it shouldn't take much time. Thick black miasma, visible to the naked eye, began to rise from the dungeon. Somewhere inside sat the silhouette of a man who said that today there would be a bountiful harvest. The man continued to laugh as he sat at his desk. He saw or sensed a new group of adventurers coming down. The man said that more victims were coming his way. The boys gathered their groups, broke camp, and headed for the entrance to the dungeon. Renya suddenly stopped, then turned to the others and said that he wanted to clarify something first. He looked at all the participants of the expedition and then asked them directly what their main goal was. Xian answered that they first had to complete the quest, and then find the Sharp Fangs and Scarlet Guard groups. Rona also raised her hand slightly, indicating that she also wanted to add, after which she said that given their condition, the girl was thinking about finding them and helping them first. Renya said that they don't even know what could have happened inside and what happened to the groups. Plus, they don't have any experience, so they shouldn't take on too much. I immediately agreed. After a short pause, Renya said that if the other groups were defeated inside, then the logical thing for them to do would be to retreat. Az stared at the guy, not understanding what he was talking about. I suddenly said sharply that, in general, that was the case. He also added that, after all, part of the quest was eliminating several groups from the guild. Many, including Renya, turned to look at Aza. He just laughed, saying that it was just a joke. Renya said that it was not funny, then thought that the people of this world were scary, not to mention the criminals. Renya continued to look at Az, and then asked if he really didn't mind Renya leading the sortie, since he was an F rank. Az answered without further ado that he didn't mind. The magician explained that after the incident that happened in the tavern, He was convinced with his own eyes that Renya was definitely higher than the rank she held. He also added afterwards that during his conversation with Hearts, all his decisions were well-founded. Since he would entrust the leadership of the group to Rainier, he would be able to better focus on the spells. I also turned to my armored guys and asked them if his team was okay with it. One of the men answered for everyone, saying that they were all for it. Renya said that in that case, he and Sion would go ahead. Rona and Az would move in the center, exploring the area with the help of the god's mark that the female knight possessed. Well, the other four, who are well-armed and wear good armor, will cover the entire group from behind, eliminating the danger of an attack on their mage. After Renya had assigned the members of the expedition to their places, he asked if everyone was ready. Almost no one answered, giving a silent signal with their nod. Renya said that, in that case, they were moving out. Step by step, they continued to descend into the increasing darkness. No one knew what awaited them there, inside. After they descended, the light from above stopped shining, and it was necessary to illuminate. Renya initially decided to use a light spell, but his other hand was holding a torch at that moment. Sion called out to the boy, showing him this. Rona laughed, and they continued walking. The group continued forward, and then suddenly Renya turned around and asked if the others saw anything suspicious or strange ahead. Sion turned around and said that she didn't see anything out of the ordinary, but in her opinion, that was to be expected from a new dungeon. Then, in a slightly quieter voice, she added that it was for the time being. Renya thought that Zest didn't seem to have planned any traps, and they still hadn't noticed them along the way. Could it be that he himself had fallen into them? In any case, they all moved on together. After a few meters, Az waved his hand, pointing somewhere. The magician said that there was something strange in that direction. It was a passage, two-doored and wooden, set in the wall. Renya began to look from it, thinking that it was too far from the entrance, which was really strange. I immediately said that this shouldn't be in the new dungeon. Rona added that demons usually hide behind such doors, but there really shouldn't be any here. Suddenly, Renya looked down and saw a spot, about 30 centimeters in diameter, scattered across the floor. He said it was blood, and it had already dried but was still visible. Renya leaned down, bringing his torch closer to examine the trail carefully. He asked, thinking that the blood might belong to one of the first group. Rona said that it really could be, but the dungeon was absorbing it. Then the girl looked at the door and said that this was the road leading here straight from the entrance. That's why it was quite possible, considering how long it took them to get here. Az began to calm the others down a little, saying that it could have been the blood of an enemy, so the answer had to be right behind the door, which was now in front of them. Sion raised her head and said that she couldn't believe that Hearts and Zest could be defeated. Renya remained in the same position, only slightly raising her head. The boy said that he thought that was what had happened, because he felt some unpleasant presence behind that door. I said that, even if it was, it didn't prove anything. It was too early for them to back down, at least until they found something that would help them figure things out. Some childish enthusiasm continued to fill Sion, so she immediately agreed with Az, saying that they should enter the tiger's den. Everyone around began to look at each other, more towards Renya. Renya agreed, but immediately made his intentions clear. The guy said that if he thought it was becoming dangerous, they would immediately return, because safety came first. Everyone agreed with him, and then began to take positions. Everyone got ready, and Sion, along with Renya, who were in the front, stuck to the doors and began to slowly push them in. A small and unpleasant surprise immediately overtook them from the door. An extremely strong smell began to waft in, hitting their noses, bringing them to the point of disgust. Many began to cover their noses. Rainier didn't even have to sniff, because he immediately smelled rotten meat or something like that. He told everyone else that they were moving on, and for the group to be on the alert. Renya looked around, realizing that there was light behind the door. He didn't understand the reason, because there was no electricity in this world. Sion looked at the boy, wondering how he could be so calm. Something clicked ahead, and Renya immediately put his hands on the Japanese sword, alerting the team that there was someone ahead. Sion also saw the silhouette and began to get nervous. The creature that stood before them did indeed look somewhat like a man, dressed in a black shirt and white robe. His nails were long and black. He stood up from his full stupor, then said that they had come to him after all. Then the man spread his arms out to the sides and added that he was glad to welcome the group to his laboratory. Afterwards, he began to grin menacingly, calling the people standing in the passage his guinea pigs. Looking closely, his narrow demonic pupils became visible. Rona pressed her hand to her chest, saying that the creature had dark skin, purple hair, and seemed to be a demon. It was unclear why he was here, since this race lived on the central continent. Rona also added that it was the first time she had seen one of them. It was known that this class was superior to humans in magical powers, and they would definitely not be able to defeat them. Az, who was standing nearby, whispered to Renya that this guy who was in front of them was very dangerous, so they had to leave immediately. Renya agreed, after which they heard the demon address them. The demon asked if his guests were planning to leave already. He also wanted to know if they thought it would be very rude of them to leave so quickly. Most were simply frozen in fear. Sion suddenly cried out, wondering where the other 11 people who had come before them were. She wanted to know what he had done to them. Renya started to stop her, but the demon suddenly thought, stroking his chin with his nails. He did not understand what Sion meant when she spoke of 11 adventurers. After thinking for a moment, the demon smiled broadly and said that he had no idea. He also added that he had not seen anything, even though he had been sitting there all this time. Sion continued her assault, shouting for the demon not to deceive them. The girl was easily angered, but not the rest of the team, who were more experienced. The demon seemed to really not understand what was being discussed. Renya exhaled, and then decided to ask in a different way. The guy said where the other 11 guinea pigs who came here before were. Renya's voice changed, and the guy started speaking in another language. The guy remembered the skill given to him by the goddess. The others looked at the guy in shock, very scared. The demon laughed, saying that Renya was quite a funny guy. In his own language, he said twice that he understood, then immediately translated it for the others. Now he really understood. The demon took a few steps forward, then stuck his hand somewhere, as if into a bottomless vault. Then he pulled out Zest's body and said that they were probably looking for this. Zest's body was in a terrible state. He looked like a dead man, but as if he were alive because he kept making some kind of mooing noise. Everyone was very frightened by such a demonstration. The demon began to say that he had created this dungeon to collect the material he needed for his experiments, and he had already collected enough. It was for this reason that he had managed to advance so much in his research. Zest's body continued to move, and soon, through the invisible wall of the vault, another body appeared, which had previously belonged to Hurst. The demon said that he had achieved great success today. All the adventurers went into high alert, realizing that their comrades had been killed, and the same could happen to them. The demon said that there were 11 of them, if he was not mistaken. After the so-alive coward Zest and Hartza went out, the rest of the group began to follow them, as if still loyal to their leaders. The demon said that this is exactly what he was asked about now. The demon also added that for his experiments, he needed these bodies alive. He adjusted his glasses and said that even though they looked like that, he was completely sane. Renya thought that things were really bad. The demon began to calm the group, seeing how disgusted they were. He mimicked them and told them not to be afraid. Afterwards, he paused for a moment and said that they would soon join these rabbits. The zombies began to open their mouths and walk towards Renya's group. The whole group started screaming. Renya turned and gave the order for everyone to leave immediately. I repeated his words, calling on everyone to quickly get out of here. Renya turned to Sion and shouted for her to leave as well. The door began to be blocked by some liquid and thick black masses, reminiscent of shapeless slugs. They blocked the passage and then began to rush at the Knights of Az, who tried to somehow push them away. One of the warriors shouted that this thing melted his shield. The demon continued to speak calmly, explaining that these monsters really like to absorb iron. He conducted several tests, which showed that they also liked human blood. Renya thought angrily that they should retreat, but with such a rear, they definitely couldn't win. Renya shifted his gaze and thought that if they wanted to leave here, they would have to kill this guy. Rona started shouting Renya's name, trying to get his attention. When the boy turned around, Ro said that Zest and the others were already very close to them, just 2 steps away. Zest's body had changed greatly. Empty eye sockets like rotten teeth, and drool that continuously flowed from his mouth. He tried to say something that sounded like help. He was the first of the crowd, as he was apparently the first to get out of the vault. All the zombies were quite slow. Sion began to shrink back, but Renya stood firm. Renya took out his Japanese sword, and with one deft movement, immediately decapitated the advancing Zest. Sion only managed to say the name of her leader, as if she hiccuped. The voices of the former leader of the Sharp Fangs fell right at the feet of the demon, who was watching this whole show with satisfaction. Renya shouted to the group not to doubt, because these people can no longer be saved. Afterwards, Renya, seeing Shion's hands and body shaking, told her that if the girl worries about the former guild members who are already dead, then they will join their ranks. Shinon realized that Renya was indeed right. Afterwards, the guy began to give orders to his team, saying that Renya was leaving all the walking dead to Shion. Afterwards, he added that I would cover them with my protective magic. Rona would have to prepare a healing spell. The guy was going to take the demon himself. Renya also added that zombies are poisonous. The entire group suddenly perked up, saying that they understood the leader. Renya prepared the spell that Oz taught him and fired 8 fire bullets towards the demon. Shion was surprised to think that Renya was actually attacking with magic. Oz was equally shocked to see that the guy actually fired all of them at once. The demon saw the fireballs heading towards him and then said, "Be my strength, shit." A barrier immediately appeared around him, reflecting the flying fire. The demon thought about it, because he assumed that this young man was a swordsman. But Renya, as it was clear, could use magic as well, and at the same time. After trying out the new spell, Renya looked ahead, realizing that the fire bullet worked in this manner. However, Renya knew that it would be of little use when attacking directly. The demon adjusted his glasses, looking at Rainier, and asked if the boy wanted to have a magical duel with him. Then he extended his hand and summoned an air blade. The demon directed this spell towards Renya, after which several white-cutting blows of magical power rushed towards the young man. The guy had definitely never seen such a thing. Renya had no other choice now, so he immediately began to dodge. The young man understood that this was a type of sequential attack that was executed quite quickly. The circle of magic blades began to narrow, getting closer and closer to Renya. Suddenly, the guy realized that his affairs were very bad, and if he missed this, he would be cut right there. Against the backdrop of some critical thinking in Renyi's head, suddenly images began to flash, like memories from an old life. The guy suddenly concentrated on the blow flying at him. Swinging his Japanese sword, the boy aimed the blow straight towards the magical power and was able to disperse the blow, as if he was parrying a normal weapon. The demon's eyes widened as he realized that the boy had managed to destroy his air blades with his weapon. This was the first time the demon had encountered such a practice, especially on the human continent. The demon's face began to change dramatically, realizing that the threat was starting to grow into something serious, already substantial. He was more concerned about the question of what was going on with that sword in Renya's hands. While the demon hesitated and was amazed by his opponent's actions, Renya was getting closer with every step. Soon the boy pushed off and rose up, raising his blade above the monster. The demon realized that at some point he had lost his concentration and become distracted, underestimating the group from the start. He began to shout a new spell, but it was too late to act. Renya managed to catch up with him, and the blade began to descend. The demon only managed to dodge back a little, removing his body from the attack. The mistake he made cost him his arm, which immediately separated from his body and flew in the other direction. Renya stopped, not understanding what just happened. Renya saw that the demon did not resist at all when the blow hit. This attack should have killed him, but he remained standing. The demon adjusted his glasses with his other hand, and then began to laugh. When the demon raised his head up, the young man saw a grin on his face. The creature said that the guy had a very interesting sword, and now he was interested in this weapon. Renya smiled back, saying that he could say the same about his body. As expected from another world, this demon would cause Renya a lot of trouble. Gilel also noticed what happened when Renya was breaking through to the demon. She suddenly shouted that his sword was able to destroy magic. The girl emotionally added that only sacred objects have this property. No other things can destroy magic. Gilel pointed to the Shinai and said that here it is, and she knew exactly that. That's why she personally brought it to him. The Shinai was exactly like that. The goddess was indignant that Gilel was so noisy. She asked her to be quiet for at least a second. Gilel continued to loudly ask where Renya got the indestructible object. The goddess said that she suddenly thought about it and realized that giving Rainier a shinai would be kind of scary, because it really is an obre. Obviously, a shinai can't be durable, and that's not cool at all. She also said that the shinai is simply a bamboo sword in essence. He began waving his finger. The goddess added that she thought that it was necessary to somehow hide its super strength. And then it finally dawned on her, because no one would be surprised if a Japanese katana was super strong. Well, something like that. Besides, such a weapon requires careful maintenance. Gilel continued to be angry, trying not to show it. The goddess continued, saying that since she was so generous, she should have armed the messenger properly and sent Gilel to him. And on top of that, she took away the Sinai's indestructibility so they wouldn't have to worry if he was found. Gilel screamed that she, as an angel, couldn't just turn a blind eye to all this. Because of all these damn whims of the goddess, the angel could not relax for a second. The goddess said that Goriel could calm down, after which the girl began to scream even louder, saying that this is not her name. The goddess waved her finger again, telling her assistant to forget about the shinai. After all, if the guy had a katana, no one would suspect that it was super strong. Moreover, Renya wields it well. And there was something else, because the goddess also gifted the guy with excellent work capacity, so the rest is just a matter of time. Meanwhile, Gilel said that this was the reason she was worried. In the dungeon, the demon stood in front of Renya and said that he had never seen such a weapon before, and that this sword must have some special feature. The demon held out his hand, saying that the boy had accurately reflected his magic. The creature found this very amusing and then asked Renya to show him the blade. Renya looked at the demon and said that he had no idea what he was talking about. The guy refused to show the sword, adding that he had exchanged it with a passing merchant. The demon spread his arms out to the sides and said that Renya was very harmful. He also lobavel that it would be easier if he showed him the weapon. Afterwards, the demon smiled and said that he had no other choice. The demon suddenly stretched his hand to the side, holding the glasses with the other, so that they would not fly off. From the place where the demon's left hand had been, some black threads began to crawl out. These threads immediately crawled after the demon's hand, which remained lying in the same place where it had bounced. They dragged it back, and after some time, the hand was already completely in its place. Renya smirked, saying that this would be a real pain in the ass. The demon slowly began to move his severed arm, laughing at the boy's comment. Afterwards, he said that the same could be said about Renya. With these words, he rushed forward, gaining enormous speed. Renya managed to put his blade forward. Renya thought that this demon could regenerate, so trying to dismember it would be useless. It was necessary to choose some other way of fighting. Renya grabbed his katana sheath and quickly shouted the spell, "Fire Bullet." The balls immediately shot forward, also in quantity of several. The demon thought about it first, saw how the guy could use instant activation without using a spell. Then he shouted that Renya was a fool, because for him, it was nothing. Renya's plan became clear. The boy only wanted to distract the demon with magic. The young man took his sheath and struck it at the demon's chin, completely exposing his neck. The demon's last thought was about Shirasaya, which he saw. This is literally what they called the white sheath, that is, the Japanese sword in the staff video. The demon thought about something. Could this mean something? The next moment, there was a slashing blow, for which Renya had already prepared a masterful thrust. The demon's body immediately split into two parts and fell to the ground. He only managed to stretch his arms forward, which, like all other parts of his body, continued to tremble. Renya began to come closer, tipping his standing legs over. The demon began to scream in pain. Renya walked closer to him, completely ignoring his screams, and began to raise his blade up above his head to deliver a finishing blow. First, Renya cut off his second arm, which had previously been unharmed, and then raised his sword again and with a thrust pierced the head exactly in the center of the forehead. After that, Renya did not take out his blade, but immediately turned towards the rest of the group of adventurers, wondering if it was all over. It all started with a simple walk. From the city of Kukuria, there are countless reports of demon and monster attacks, which is why there are so many adventurers here. Shinon said excitedly that she and Ro were adventurers too. The girl approached the bulletin board, where she saw that famous groups were included in the task. Shinon knew quite a bit about them, as their fame had already gone far ahead of them. the Scarlet Guardians, the Sharp Fang Group, and those who specialized in magic. At that time, she thought that she would be able to learn so much if they took this task. But everything turned out to be a nightmare. Those whom Sion had exalted so much fell, turning into some demon's tool. The people she knew before didn't look like themselves. Even though the demons said they were still as smart as before, looking at these living bodies, it was hard to believe. And Sion felt like her patterns were broken when she saw the great adventurers being defeated. But now it was time to pull herself together, because Sion knew that they couldn't let each other down in the group now. Sion apologized in her mind and lowered her sword, cutting Zest in half as he walked in front of her. She managed to pull herself together as they were fighting for their lives right now. Rona called out to Sion, telling her that the amount of toxin was increasing. Ro asked Sion to cover her while she cast a spell to eliminate it. Sion was still a little confused. It was obvious that the girl had no face, but she continued to fight. Sion nodded in response to Ro's request, saying that she understood. Meanwhile, Renya finished dividing the demon into pieces, after which she began to burn its remains in order to completely eliminate the possibility of its resurrection. Renya looked at the burning body and thought that this should be enough. The boy took something from the demon's body before burning it, a small white handkerchief made of good fabric. Renya wiped the katana that was now his with the cloth. He knew that it had surpassed his expectations, because despite its lightness, its blade was incredibly sharp and even resistant to magic. The very memory that visited him at the moment when the young man parried the air blade came into his head again. What was that? Had he lived a life in which he was a soldier? Renya decided that it was not that important now. He decided that he would think about it later, when it was calmer and safer. Renya immediately rushed to help the rest of the group and began to fight the zombies. Overall, there weren't many enemies left. Oz, his team, and Sion, along with Rona, did a great job. The last one Renya hit was the former member of the Sharp Fang Group. Sion immediately exclaimed when she saw the blade of the Japanese sword, calling the boy's name. It was obvious that she was very worried. Renya asked if it was the last one. Sion answered that it was. After Sion asked where the demon had gone, Renya immediately turned towards the place where the demon had been sitting from the beginning. There was a flame burning there, and the youth replied that he had taken care of the monster. Rona and Sion stared at the burning body in silence. Sion suddenly asked how Renya managed to defeat that demon just like that. Rona was also surprised, and Renya, looking around, wanted to know where Az was. I wasn't very far away at the time. The magician held his staff out and began to call upon the fire spell, shouting for the flames to become his power. Then he said, "Burn," and the fire burst forth in a huge stream. All this time, they were fighting monsters that looked like black, viscous slime. I burned the last of the attackers, after which I said that everything was on their flank. Az turned to Rona, saying that his boys had been dealt a pretty hard time. He apologized, then asked the girl to take care of his team. Rona agreed and headed towards them. The girl started walking towards the group of explorers, but almost immediately turned her head towards Rainier, saying that she would examine him in a minute, because there was simply a sea of toxin here. Renya smiled shyly at her, saying that he would wait, and then immediately noticed some movement out of the corner of his eye. It was very fast, and something black suddenly hit Rona on the back. Rona immediately began to fall backwards. Sion and Renya looked at the girl in fear, loudly shouting her name. Renya did not understand what the hell was going on. Renya turned his head in the direction where the threat came from. He instantly became very angry because he saw how Rona suffered before his eyes. They were some kind of black tentacles. They began attacking the rest of the team at the same rapid pace. Shun and Az literally simultaneously received a blow, which, like Ro, also abruptly knocked him to the ground. Renya took out his katana again and heard the demon's voice. The demon said that he was very impressed with the boy, because he couldn't even think at first that the young man would be able to bring him to this. Renya looked towards the demon, putting on a small tired smile. Renya let out a small laugh, then said that he had stabbed, decapitated, and burned him. The demon continued to laugh, pausing briefly before asking if Renya was sure that this was his real body. A new corporeal shell began to form from the void. When the demon reappeared, his legs began to walk again and headed towards Rainier. He adjusted his glasses and said that it could just be part of his real body, for example. With a grinning face, he came closer and asked if this was possible according to Renya. The young man thought that this demon was really causing a lot of trouble. He was even able to restore the clothes. Suddenly, Renya heard someone calling him. It was Sion, who was trying to get back on her feet. Her body was shaking, and Renya suddenly thought that the girl had managed to block the sword strike. The demon looked at the girl in surprise, thinking out loud that he was wrong. After all, he thought he had knocked the girl out. There was a lot of interesting and amusing stuff about these people. Afterwards, he said that in the state Sion was in, it didn't matter anyway. Sion gritted her teeth and looked at the demon, asking what he said. At that moment, 2 black tendrils that the demon controlled began to wrap around Sion's leg, and also began to grab the unconscious Rona. They pulled them up and then dragged them towards the demon. The tentacles held the girls' bodies tightly, wrapping mainly around their torsos, legs, and necks. Sion tried to ease the pressure, wheezing, as she called out Rennie's name. The demon smiled broadly, saying that the guy, that is called Renya. The demon added that he likes the guy, because he really is a very interesting person. The demon began to say that Renya was a master swordsman and could also cast multiple spells without saying a word. He also made cold-blooded decisions without a trace of hesitation. The demon tilted his head back, looking at the young man more appraisingly. He said that he hadn't expected that from a human. The demon was curious about who Renya was. He began to speculate that the boy might be a hero chosen by God. Renya glared at him, holding a katana in his hands, and then said that he had no idea what he was talking about. Afterwards, Renya said that to begin with, he didn't even know who this person was. It was he who had arranged everything here, and hadn't even said his name. The demon suddenly said that Renya was right, because he really hadn't introduced himself. Renya quickly looked around, seeing the walls begin to disappear, as if dissolving. But upon closer inspection, Renya realized that he was the one absorbing them. Renya chuckled, saying that everything was clear to him now. The boy made his conclusion, calling this entire room a part of the demon's body. The demon smiled back. He replied that Renya had hit the nail on the head with his conclusion. He then added that his body could take on many forms, and that was how he could avoid fatal injuries. The demon raised his hand up and said menacingly that his name was Emil Raya. He managed to modify his body with the help of many experiments because he is a magician scientist. Afterwards, Emil said that he specializes in researching and modifying biological bodies. Each time, he searches for the best specimens, so he wanted to fully study Rainier. The demon extended his hands closer, as if tasting the human, and then said that Renya could be his. If the young man agreed, the magician would grant him a superb new body. Renya knew that he wasn't happy with his proposal at all. At the same time, Sion and Rona were still in mortal danger and needed to be pulled out of here. Renya rushed forward, quickly closing the distance to his target. When he got to the right distance, he immediately struck with his katana, but Emil managed to dodge. After that, Emil quickly jumped to the side, gaining a safe distance. Still, Renya managed to hit a little, separating a small piece of the tentacle. Renya raised his head up, looking at the magician, and then said that he refused. Renya also added that just the thought of a man wanting to touch his body made the young man want to puke. Emil adjusted his glasses, which were slipping down a little, and then said that it was dangerous because Renya attacked without giving an answer. Emil admitted that it was dangerous to be around Renya. Emil loosened his tentacles a little and said that he had originally planned to use 2 women for the experiment, but now thought it would be better to start studying with Renya. The demon began to grow, acquiring new tentacles, which were now visible. Then he smiled and said that in that case, the demon was ready to continue their battle, for everything was ready. 3 of its black limbs immediately rushed towards Renya from behind its back. Renya managed to see this triple attack. As soon as they caught up with him, Renya began to masterfully, in his own manner, wield the katana, cutting Emil's black and long tentacles. The magician continued to admire and decided to slightly change the external conditions. Suddenly, it became dark and the tentacles disappeared, as did Emil himself, from the field of vision. Renya was very surprised by this turn of events, but he understood that he could not stand still. Continuing to concentrate his attention in the complete and pitch darkness, Renya was able to repel another attack by cutting off a tentacle, but something suddenly got him from the side. Renya spat out a little blood, then grabbed the place where the blow had been dealt. The guy deftly jumped aside and began to listen to where the attack would come from next. The pain in his side was getting worse. Renya heard Emil say that the boy was doing a great job. The demon explained that he had turned off the lights and used ink, but Renya had avoided them perfectly. Suddenly, Renya threw his hand to the side and the room became a little brighter. Now it really looked like a dungeon. 2 patches of light gave the guy a little visibility. The hardest thing right now was Emil's tentacle attacks. He could control the strength, speed, and direction of his attacks. Renya knew that if he hit him, the situation would become dangerous. Renya began to replay all the moments that had happened in the last few minutes. Sion had managed to block Emil's attack, but Oz and Rona had been directly injured. They needed to be disposed of as soon as possible. Besides, Oz's group was poisoned, so they couldn't fight now. Renya chuckled, thinking that the situation couldn't be worse. Renya added some light to the room, then took hold of the Japanese katana with both hands and mentally addressed the boys, asking them to be patient for a little while. The demon once again pointed out that Renya was using simultaneous activation. He was surprised at first, but said that the guy only had light and fire bullet. Even though these were basic spells, the way Renya did them just irritated Emil. Renya thought that it was to be expected that a demon would be able to notice such things. Emil started laughing, shouting that Renya should never underestimate him. The demon then began to make several consecutive attacks, from which Renya dodged. Renya gradually dodged the blows to the side, gradually reducing the distance to the demon. Emil noticed this, thinking that Renya began to move much faster. When Renya got close enough, he suddenly jumped up, lifting himself off the ground and raised his blade high again, preparing to strike. Emil saw this, so he summoned an air blade. The demon angrily shouted for Renya to try to cut this, but the youth did not have time to react like that time, so he simply defended himself with the sword and was thrown back. Renya became angrier and angrier with each passing minute. The demon only smirked, saying that he didn't want to tell Renya from the beginning, but he's not the only one who can use magic without speaking. Renya thought about attacking him from above, but now he realized that if he got close, he would be attacked with magic. Renya knew that he had to continue, and then he could. While the young man was furious but continued to take steps, Gilel began to approach her mistress, also watching this fight. She asked if everything was okay. Gilel told her about Renya, adding that it was all very bad. In her opinion, it was too early for the boy to encounter a demon. The goddess said that the girl could not worry. The lady also said that everything is going well, because Renya has her blessing after all. Gilel said that it is still too much, because this demon does not even fight seriously. The goddess scratched her head, wondering if this was true. The girl thought that Renya might have simply forgotten how to use his power. Gilel immediately exclaimed in surprise. Gilel immediately said that Renya could have been like that in his previous life. The girl came to the conclusion that the young man did not even use the skill blessings. The goddess thought that it might be like that. She looked at Renya, saying that he seemed to have high magic and physical stats as a result of failing blessing, but no. The goddess turned to the angel and immediately asked him to stop. She asked that if she was so curious, why didn't she check the initial files herself? Gilel said that she thought it was all because of the blessing. They continued to watch as Renya gradually fell into his battle trance. His face changed in an instant, and he began to feel the thrill of mortal danger. Kunugi Renya was the 14th heir to the Ito-Ryu style of the Kunugi school, a school of one sword. By the age of 13, he had already become the best swordsman in the entire school. At 15, he went to China, where he learned stealth and assassination techniques. He was part of one of the most armed and dangerous gangs in the criminal world. He killed so many people that his name alone made everyone fear death. He then took part in the First World War, where he also killed hundreds of people. By this point, standing on a mountain of corpses he had killed with just his katana, the number of which was impossible to count. Everyone recognized his devilish power. Enemies and his comrades who heard and knew about Renya began to call him the Devil's Swordsman. In his home province, people were proud of the boy, despite the fact that his path to news was strewn with dead. The goddess continued, saying that for his services he had been awarded many military awards and had been sent to the battlefield many times. There are only 1 in 56 billion people like him, because he is something special. after the goddess started wagging her finger, saying that they probably shouldn't worry at all. Giulio looked at the lady indignantly, and then asked her if she really wanted to save the world. One of the stages of the fight passed, and Renya was able to survive. He waved his hand and asked if this was all that Emile was capable of. Then he said that this could be all that demons are capable of. Emile covered his face with his hand, after which he said that Renya really was a thorn in his side, and he still couldn't understand the reason. Emile suddenly said that it was great. Then he raised his head, went out so that Renya could clearly see his face, and started laughing loudly, continuing to shout that he wanted more. Emile really seemed out of his mind. He started throwing up his hands and asking Renya to let him see more. He intended to continue enjoying this. Renya just called the demon a crazy psycho. But then he thought to himself that he was exactly the same. Emile provoked the guy, telling Renya to tell him what else the guy had. Renya got into a fighting stance, then told the demon to shut up. Renya then swallowed softly and said that he intended to finish everything with his next attack. Emile continued to smile, and then said that he understood. Since Renya was going to attack him with all his might, the demon had to go all out as well. Emile began to quickly transform, adding a bunch of extra tentacles to himself. He began to laugh, shouting at Rainier to attack him with all his might. Renya thought that the demon really had a lot of power left. Emile continued to provoke Kunugi, asking what he would do now, and Renya went on the attack. Renya began jumping from one tentacle to another. Now they had something like a mouth, which tried to touch the young man. But Renya was precise and careful. Emile continued to speak, saying that Renya must be tired of this attack. He then summoned his air blade again, commanding the spell to cut the boy. Renya thrust his katana forward, deflecting the attack with magic. Emile could see clearly that Renya could only deflect his air blade with his sword, but it left holes in his defense. It was now that Emile could attack Renya from behind, inflicting the long-awaited defeat on him. The tentacles rushed towards the young man, surrounding him. But Renya called upon a light spell. The boy used the maximum potential of this spell that he could achieve. Renya summoned 16 simultaneous flashes of light almost in one place. The demon instinctively turned away, blinded by such a bright light. He knew that this was what Renya was trying to do. But what was he planning next? Renya suddenly appeared behind Emile, but the demon noticed it too late. Renya said that he was much faster and more agile than the demon expected. Emile only managed to turn around, realizing that his enemy was behind him. He began to cast the beginning of his spell, trying to summon an air blade, but Renya shouted loudly that it was too late. Renya dealt several crushing blows to Emile's back, which should have left him no chance of survival, since the demon had gathered all his power into one body. After being completely cut up, Emile tried to regenerate again, rebuilding his body. Renya immediately saw this, as he was watching the demon closely. Renya struck his katana a few more times, then pulled out his hand and cast the spell, Fire Bullet. The maximum number of projectiles immediately fell on Emile. Entire body began to blaze in an instant, and from there, from the fire, one could only hear the heavy breathing and groans that belonged to the learned magician. It really did look like the end of the fight. Renya was making his way through the fire, getting closer to the part where the demon's head remained. He was shaking all over and bleeding. Emile spoke hoarsely, asking not to tell him what that attack was, because Renya seemed to know what he had planned. Renya replied that he was simply waiting for his counterattack, because he only needed one gap. Emile said that he understood everything, and it seemed that he really lost. A demon like him lost to a human, and what's worse, to a human using basic spells. The demon asked if Renya found this funny. Renya looked menacingly at his enemy, who was still lying on the floor, and asked if he really was asking for mercy. The demon should be grateful that he would die painlessly. Afterwards, Renya switched back to Emile's native language, and told him that since he could no longer regenerate, there would be nothing left for him. Emile stared at Renya in surprise. Renya had already raised his blade when he suddenly heard Emile's hoarse voice. The demon said that it was for this reason that he fell in love with him almost immediately. Renya was surprised, after which Emile said that this was indeed his boy, Renya. It was simply impossible not to fall in love with him, and that cold look was completely devoid of a drop of mercy. Emile, meanwhile, gradually grew his limbs, with which he began to gesticulate. He said that his body was trembling, but he was upset that Renya was human. Afterwards, he said again that Emile could have turned him into a demon, and then Renya would be his. But Renya was already tired of hearing the same thing over and over again. As the katana pierced the demon's body, Emil began to scream, asking Rainier to stop. He wanted the young man to give him a chance to finish and listen to him. Emil continued to scream, saying how much it hurt. The demon begged Renya to stop because he was serious. But Renya said that he did not want to hear anything more because he was disgusted. Emil croaked that he wanted to propose a deal. Renya looked at him in surprise and asked again. Emil smiled and told the boy to look around. He was no longer a fighter. The demon continued, saying that after Renya played with his body, Emil was completely exhausted. It was a bad idea to try to enslave Renya, so he openly surrenders. Emil added that Renya still had enough strength to finish him off compared to his comrades. They were sent. And I wonder if they would survive until the guy got to the city. Renya knew the demon was right. If he left his group here, they would definitely die. The demon said he had everything he needed to save the people, so he was offering a deal. Renya had to let him go alive, and he would heal everyone's wounds so they could get to the city. Afterwards, he asked Renya what she thought about it. Moreover, he said that he would give the guy the core of the dungeon. It was of no use to Emil. Afterwards, he said that this was, it seemed, Renyi's original goal, to destroy the core. The demon said that in his opinion, he was offering a good deal. Renya angrily asked how he could trust a demon after what he had done to the other groups. Renya simply could not agree, because these people would never be the same after being turned into zombies by Emil. Emil was still lying on the ground, twitching his limbs. He said that Renya really had every right not to believe him, but she didn't have to worry about it. Emil smirked and said that now he only wanted Rainier, and he wouldn't change that. Even if he turned women into zombies and made them attack him, the poison would hardly affect him. Emil told Renya to decide before it was too late. The guy had to understand that he couldn't save them now. And besides, Emil didn't think he could abandon his comrades. Emil asked if he was speaking correctly. After that, he raised his two hands, which already looked like whole ones, and said that that was why he wanted to hug Rainier right now. On the other hand, in order to prevent Renya's group from finding out that he helped the demon, Emil was able to prepare another body that would live up to all his expectations because he wants to touch Renya. Renya brought his katana to the demon's head, then said that Emil was being too generous. Afterwards, the young man reminded the demon of his words, because Emil said that he was not interested in people. The demon chuckled, said that Renya was special. Then Emil said that he had mentioned it more than once. The scientist simply fell in love with him, so death at his hands was not so bad. But what will Renya do next? He has nothing with him that he can use to help his colleagues, and it will be impossible to carry everyone away. So Renya still has to decide something. He just stood there, silent, and stared blankly at the demon for a long time. Sion and Rona's voices kept ringing in his head, thanking the boy for joining their group. Renya lowered his sword and said he would have one more condition. Emil looked at him in surprise, and Renya said that the demon would help him carry the bodies to the carts. Sion was lying in a thin sleeping bag and suddenly began to open her eyes. She could hear the sound of hooves and wheels, but she still had difficulty understanding where she was. After she fully opened her eyes and looked around, the girl realized that she was in a carriage, and opposite her was Renya, who was holding the horse's reins. Sion suddenly started to rise, shouting the guy's name. Suddenly, her whole body convulsed with pain. The girl immediately asked to grab her body. Renya turned around, happy that Sion had finally woken up. He told her not to worry, since he had killed the demon and destroyed the core of the living dungeon. Afterwards, he began waving one of the core fragments, saying that he himself hadn't expected this, to be honest. But it was better for them, because the reward for them would be much larger coins. Renya said that they were heading to the city now and that they were almost at Kukurika. He also added that Shion's wounds weren't very deep, but she should still rest for a while. Shion waved her hand gently, then began to climb back into her sleeping bag. The girl thought that it was Renya who saved her again. In the city, everyone received full assistance and began to come to their senses. The guys gathered in the tavern, where they began to discuss what had happened. I began to ask what had happened in the dungeon. Renya held the mug in his hand, said that after everything he sent a report to the guild. It was about the demon and his experiments on people, and the ability to regenerate Also, Renya also sent the dungeon core he got after destroying it to the guild. The reward should be pretty good, so it's okay. Renya held a bag of coins in his hand and said that the guild had given him a reward for 4 groups. This was 34 gold coins, plus 60 gold for the dungeon core and another 6 for the information about the demon. In the end, they had 100 gold coins between them. Az looked at Renya a little tensely and said that he actually didn't ask about that. Az thought that he never expected this from an F rank. Not only did the guy have the abilities of a swordsman and a mage, he also killed a demon using only basic spells. Az no longer knew who was really in front of him. Some, of course, Renya did not tell. He, along with Emil, pulled everyone up, where the demon told him that he had finished treating all the adventurers. They needed to be loaded into carts, because they would soon wake up. Renya stood and looked at the core of the dungeon. He asked Emil if they really called it magic stones here. Emil exhaled, saying that the guy was right. He also added that, to be precise, the demon himself was the true core of the dungeon, since he had created it. Adjusting his glasses, Emil said that he had given a good replacement. Emil added that this magic stone was just trash for a demon like him. But people would never notice that it wasn't a core. Afterwards, he looked at Renya silently and wanted to say something. The demon stretched his hands forward a little and asked again if Renya really didn't want to go with him. Emil promised that he would give her sensations that no human could experience. Renya suddenly pulled out his katana and told Emil to get out of here, or he would definitely kill him. Emil smiled, saying that the guy was really scary, but he only liked it. Then Emil tenderly stretched out the guy's name and said that he would be waiting for their new meeting. Renya thought that communicating with the demon really irritated him. It remained only to guess that there would be no problems because of him. Az silently looked at Renya, who apparently did not really want to spill everything. Afterwards, he said that he was not forcing him to do so. Az also asked if the guy was sure he wanted to share the reward. There were already 2 bags on the table, filled equally. Az said that they had done nothing, but Renya immediately denied this, saying that the group had taken care of the zombies. Renya also added that Az taught him Fire Bullet in a timely manner, and without this spell, it would have been very difficult for him. Deciding to sum it up, Renya said that if it weren't for them, his group would have definitely died. Renya looked a little to the side, where the rest of the explorers group were sitting and chatting happily. The young man said that just as he was grateful to the members of his group, so they wanted to thank them. Afterwards, Renya added that besides everything else, they didn't need that much money. Renya also said that Az definitely needed it. Ra started to get a little angry about such a wasteful attitude, considering that their entire group had decided to go their separate ways. I nodded sadly and said that was true. He thought that these guys had had enough adventures. I added that the last mission had been too much for them. After all, these guys were just villagers. They'd be better off going back to their old jobs, and a little gold would help them. Renya smiled and said that it was a strong-willed decision to disband his group, but the young man thought that it was for the best. I bowed my head and thanked Renya, saying that he really appreciated it. Renya asked Az what he was going to do. The guy added that, if he had nowhere else to go, he could join them. Az put his hand out and declined, saying that he had already received one offer. It was from the Adventurer Training Academy in Kukuriku. He was invited to teach there. Most of them are from noble families, and the real purpose of the place is to develop potential. Az also said that the truth is that only a few of them will end up becoming adventurers. Renya raised his mug, saying that knowing is interesting, and glanced sideways at Rona and Sion. I said that although he couldn't join Renya's group, if he ever needed his help, the guy could confidently count on him. Renya thanked him and extended his hand to Azu. The young man said that perhaps this was their fate. Then he added that this also applied to Azu, regarding help, so he could also ask. I joked at the end that now he would only need help with solving problems at the academy. They laughed, after which the group of explorers began to leave, saying goodbye. After their new friends left the inn, Renya folded his hands and said that he didn't know if he should say this, but they didn't have enough money for a house. Rona said, displeased, that it was. Then she turned and said that Renya probably should have played the good guy, even though he could have collected more gold. Renya said that Ro had used up a lot of healing mana, and then asked how she was. Ro said that was true and that in order to heal her wounds, she had to take some of the damage herself. Renya thought that Emil really hadn't deceived him. Roan would have been better off sleeping. Sion was suspiciously quiet, but she was fine. Renya assumed that Sion had fully recovered. Then the girl suddenly jumped up from her seat, shouting the boy's name. Renya asked why she was shouting like that. It was obvious that Sion was very embarrassed, and she was blushing like a lobster. The girl suddenly gained confidence and asked if Renya would date her. Renya went with the girl to the hermit's grave, telling Sion that she could have just asked him to train together. Renya also added that because of this, Rona misunderstood everything and Sion confused him. Sion started screaming, asking what Renya was even talking about now since it took her so much effort to ask him about it. She asked what else he thought it could mean. Sion said that by dating, she meant being together, not going out. Renya said that he can't be with her, but it's not because of Sion. Sion slowly said that it would be a hindrance. After all, she hadn't helped in any way in the dungeon, and Renya always handled everything himself, and she was always unable to help him. Renya looked at her, thinking that he didn't think so. Suddenly, she exclaimed that she wanted to become stronger, so strong that she could fight side by side with the boy on the battlefield. Renya smiled and said that he understood. That is, Sion wanted him to train her. This, he said, was truly admirable. Sion asked him not to laugh at her, since they were members of the same group after all, and it was normal for them to train together. Renya said that he wasn't joking and that he liked her determination. Renya thought that he had never even paid attention to Sion's fighting style before. The boy pulled out his sword and told Sion to try to hurt him at least once. Renya said that if Sion could do it, he would take over her training. Sion agreed and focused on it. Then she screamed that she was attacking and struck. They continued, and Renya said that Sion was moving too slowly. He told her that she was making too many unnecessary movements, and that she needed to reduce the area of her strikes for a quick attack. Renya said that she needed to stop complicating things and attacking thoughtlessly. The girl needed to study the enemy's movements. First, the enemy needs to be stopped, and then attack when she is confident in her attack. Sion began to run out of steam as she thought about how she had already attacked Renya several times, and he hadn't even gotten a scratch on him, even though they had never fought each other before. But the girl had the feeling that he was reading her every move. She wondered in her mind how many battles he had been through before. Renya continued to shout, demanding Sion to focus. He said that all her attacks were worthless if she didn't hurt him. He needed to keep an eye on the enemy. Renya knew that this whole training battle was starting to take its toll on him, too. He suddenly said that Sion must be tired of these same attacks, and now it was his turn. Renya asked if she was ready, to which Sion replied that she wanted it. Renya had just taken a step when the rock behind Sion made a loud noise and rolled to the side, an ogre starting to emerge from behind the rock. Sion couldn't understand what he was doing there. He was huge and armed with a stone axe. Sion said that they shouldn't be in this place. Renya asked if he was strong. Sion said that usually they aren't that strong and she can handle them, but this one is really huge. Renya said he understood everything. It turned out that the ogre was an opponent she had never encountered before. The boy began to move away, sitting down slowly on a stone. The ogre began to roar, shaking everything around in fear. Sion began to scream the boy's name, asking what he was doing right now. Renya only smiled in response to this question. He extended his hand slightly forward, pointing at the ogre. Renya said that this was a great opportunity for Sion to gain experience in fighting on her own. Sion jumped up to the young man and said that it was impossible, because she only had a training sword with her that didn't even have a blade, and her sword was in Renya's storage. Renya only repeated that Sion should hurry as the ogre was clearly starting to lose patience. Sion looked ahead and decided that she had to. She had to get stronger and she couldn't make excuses. Suddenly, the girl shouted that even if it was just a little bit, she wanted to reach Renya's level. After that, Ogre had already made the first attack, swinging his axe. Sion was able to dodge. Sion made her move, finally landing an attack. She struck the back of the abdomen, but failed to penetrate. When she realized that the strike had not worked, she began to blame the sword, which had become worn out from training. The ogre immediately launched a counterattack when it felt like it was being pierced from the side. Sion let out a small yelp and dodged the stone axe's strike. Renya continued to watch, realizing that Sion was rather clumsy, but she moved well. and she was watching her opponent's movements. Strength was what was needed when using a sword without a blade. Sion didn't give up, and, dodging another attack from the massive monster, she went back again. She hit much harder, striking the back, cursing the ogre along the way. She saw that she had managed to achieve a result. Even if it was not deep, she had still managed to wound him. But the skin of the ogre and the mankala and the pits complicated the task, and at this rate the sword might not hold up. Sion also thought that she should go out to hit the head, but the ogre was very tall and jumping could be dangerous. What should she do now? Renya shouted again for her to study the monster's movements. Sion told herself in her head that she understood and began to change her fighting tactics. She began to bend down and hit the huge ogre in places that were below the waist. Renya saw that Sion had finally begun to analyze her opponent's movements. Thanks to this, she understood how to begin her action. The ogre will have a hard time attacking with horizontal movements. To fight the small enemy, he needs to use vertical attacks. But if he hits vertically, then he will have to bend over. That's exactly what the ogre did. He froze for a few seconds, holding his axe, while Sion swung her sword and cut a line through the monster's vision. Renya thought in his head that now was the moment for Sion to finish off the monster with a blow that she would put her all into. After the ogre was defeated, Sion collapsed to the ground with her sword split in half. She gulped heavily, saying that she never thought she would meet an ogre here. Renya gave the final blow, telling Sion not to relax until she made that move. The girl looked at him, saying that Renya was very strict and could have praised her better. Renya came closer to Sion and asked if she could stand up. The boy said that if she was tired, he could carry her. Sion looked at the outstretched hand, then at Renya. Sion said it was nothing, then offered her hand. As soon as Renya started to pull it, the girl gently hit the guy on the top of his head, smiling widely. Thus, she fulfilled the condition and was able to hurt the guy. Sion began to laugh, being very pleased with herself. Afterwards, she said that Renya was caught and she still succeeded. Renya scratched his head, realizing that he had just been caught in the act. Sion continued to tease him, telling him not to let his guard down. Renya thought that was it. Sion asked animatedly if Renya would really train her now. Renya said that he would really do it if that was what she wanted. Renya told Sion to get up to begin, but she said her sword was broken and she needed to rest. So their training day went by, and soon Renya was carrying her back home on his back. Ro said sarcastically that Renya seemed to have really worn the girl out. Renya looked at her askance, asking Ro not to say that because they might be misunderstood. Afterwards, Renya said that Sion was just a little impudent and he put her in her place. They told the story of the ogre at the hermit's grave, which was very strange. Ro raised a finger and said that she thought they should report this to the guild just in case and let them figure it out. And they should sell the magic stone because they needed money for a house. Afterwards, Ro added that she had some information about the house. She had noticed one when she was walking around town today. It was abandoned, so she should go and look at it.